This is great. I love that recording in progress thing. So then you know that there's a hot mic and you should watch what you say. So we're going to let all the attendees in. And welcome, everyone. It's Ari Rosenbaum here, really wearing an ugly Vancouver Canucks jersey just because I can. And welcome to the fourth edition of that 401k National Virtual Conference. Of course, the virtual event started because of COVID. And I always love to talk about the first and only national event I ever had. It's really hard to run an event during the start of a international pandemic. We did that. We left Disney World on a Wednesday, and the park was closed on Sunday for like the next 3 months. So that's why we do virtual events. And I welcome everybody here. Of course, we're going to try to run through, be as close to on schedule as possible. And of course, first things first is Bill Shorey's from Invesco. I've known Bill for quite some time, thanks to a good friend of ours, Rich Larita. And Bill is now as I say in Yiddish, a big macher with Invesco. He's the national DCIO. I remember him way back when he was just New York area. So Bill, take it away.
All right. Thank you. You can hear me okay? Just do a mic test and I'll share my screen in a minute. So
you're perfect.
Okay, excellent. Well, then I have nowhere to go but down if you're saying I'm perfect now. So, all right, let me get into presentation mode here. Slideshow should work, right? And from the beginning. Okay, so we're looking good. Hey, listen, everybody that's on, I'm happy to take questions as we go through this. I'm married with 2 kids, so I don't get to finish a sentence outside of this room. So inside of this room, please interrupt me if you want me to spend a little bit more time on something. I will have a 1-minute commercial at the end, because it's my opportunity to tout some Invesco product, but that will only be the last minute I'm on. This is a presentation as just an overview of the 401k landscape. All right, so this is a piece. I'm happy to send this out to anybody that wants it. It is 59 slides. I will not be going through 59 slides today. I promise you, even if you ask me to, I won't be. But I just want to touch on some of the more pertinent and high points of the presentation. So we call this the Defined Contribution Guidebook. It's been recently updated. You can see it has 2024 on it. But let's take a look at this. It is the growth of the retirement plan market over time. And in defined contribution plans, we have over $10 trillion in DC plans. 7.2 of that is in 401ks. But if we look at the rest of the retirement market, we have 8 trillion in state and local government DBs, 3 in private sector DBs, and 13 trillion in IRAs. And you could see the growth from 2010. Breaking down that defined contribution total a little bit more, you have 401ks with 7.2 trillion, the 403b market at 1.2. The federal thrift savings plan by itself is $800 billion. 457 plans, 420, and then all other standalone profit sharing, money purchase pension plans. They comprise 580 billion of the DC market. You can see the growth overall there. So what this has led to is, with the growth of DC, defined contribution, is falling on the participant, and we have to optimize participant outcomes as service providers, as advisors, and there's really 4 tenets of that foundation. It's investment menu design, plan design, participant engagement, because if they're not engaged, none of this matters, and then plan governance, and that's the fiduciary issues, the plan document, the running of the plan, fiduciary obligations, and so on. This is a general overview of the entire presentation, should anybody want it, and that's the 59 slides I had mentioned. You can see all the topics there. I will not be covering all of these, but I'll leave this up here for another 5 seconds just for people to take a look at the variety of topics that this presentation does cover. And if anybody does want it, just let Ari know, let me know, and we'll get that over to you. All right. In today's DC world, no standing still. We have to be always engaged with our plan sponsors and our plan participants, because the participants have taken all this risk on themselves now from a defined benefit environment, several decades ago, where the employer assumed all these risks. Now you have inflation risk, participant user risk, interest rate risk, which became very prevalent over the past few years, longevity risk, sequence of return risk, market risk, and so on. So this all falls on the participants. The other thing this has led to is different types of vehicles being utilized, and we're seeing more and more fee compression. That's a common theme in our space. First it was record keeping fees, advisor compensation. We're seeing it more and more on investment costs, whether it's passive or active, but now in the wrapper, whether it's a mutual fund, a collective trust, or more commonly known as a CIT, separate account, or private label funds, which is really in the mega plan space. We see more of that. But you could see CITs or collective trusts have grown tremendously over the past decade, and they're coming down market. We're going to see more and more of that, especially with PEPs and MEPs using some leverage when their assets get to scale to utilize and negotiate CIT pricing. We'll certainly see more of that. Engaging an evolving workforce. Well, we have millennials. We have, the last of the baby boomers still in the workforce. In the pre-retirees, we're seeing more auto features, and default investments are important to getting participant, engagement up, and millennials really gravitate towards that because they've grown up in that environment in our industry. ESG, as polarizing politically as it is still very attractive, especially in the nonprofit sector. It's more attractive to millennials and women investors. It's especially attractive on the coasts, and West Coast, East Coast, Northeast, Pacific Northwest, especially. We'll think of your blue states, not so popular in your red states. There's a movement to encourage retirees to stay in the plan, to access lower cost investments, stay with the investments they're familiar with, and eventually, if it ever gets traction, and I don't know that it will, but there's, the industry is trying very hard to get retirement income into the plans. You're seeing with the Secure 2.0 emergency savings sidecar accounts, student loan benefits, to participating in the plan, and of course, Roth. And we'll touch on the Roth feature momentarily. But all of this is being driven because of the nature of Social Security. I do enrollment meetings, education meetings, and the question I get from the younger audience especially is Social Security won't be there for me, right? And it will be. It'll be there for everybody. It just won't look like it does today. And today, it doesn't look that good. And it's not going to get any better. So you need to do something else except relying on Social Security. The average Social Security check in the United States today is just shy of $1,800 a month. That equivocates to around $21,000, $22,000 a year. If that's your idea of a comfortable retirement, you're right. You don't need to do anything. That's great. But if you're living in the tri-state area in New York City or any major metropolitan area on $21,000 a year, you're either eating or paying the rent. You're not doing both. So you need to do something else. But there are things with Social Security that you can utilize to increase the amount. But you could see here the average benefit based on your salary, how much of income replacement. So the more you make, the less of an income replacement vehicle it becomes. If you look at the claiming strategies, many people have a calendar on their wall to their 62nd birthday. And at 9:01 a.m. on their 62nd birthday, they're filing and claiming their Social Security. That is a big mistake in many instances, not all instances, but many instances, because the average Social Security check at 62, this is just an example of a certain income level, it would be $700. Same person waiting to age 67, it would be a 43% increase over $700, another $300 over $700, that's 43%. By waiting, they get $1,000 a month. That's a 43% increase. If they waited to age 70 maximum, it's a 77% increase by taking the money as soon as possible. And that not only affects you if you live longer, it impacts your surviving spouse. So they have to be educated. They have to be made aware of claiming strategies and the impacts that have on the long-term nature of themselves and their family members. So everybody wants, show me the money, I want it right away. It could be a big mistake. So claiming strategies, that certainly should be part of the participant education topic. Secure 2.0. We had Secure 1.0, setting every community up for retirement. It's actually an acronym. Secure 2.0, not an acronym. But here are the key features. You have employer and employee key features. I won't go through all of them. I'll leave this up here so you can take a look at them. But thankfully, a lot of the employer features are voluntary. Very few of them were mandatory. But the employee features, age 50 catch-up contributions must be made as a Roth contribution for those making over 145,000. Now that salary number will increase, but that was deferred until 2026, thankfully, because the payroll vendors, the record keepers, went to Congress and said, there's no way we're going to be ready. That was supposed to be effective this year. So they delayed it 2 years. There'll be an increase in catch-up contributions next year for participants age 60 or older. RMDs going up to 75. The retirement savers credit is going to a retirement savers match. This is going to be really fun to see how the government pulls this off, where if you're in a lower income category and you contribute, the government will deposit money into your account, whether it's in your 401k plan or an IRA. Where they find you, how they find your accounts, how they get the money to you, we'll see. They have 3 years to figure it out. Student loan matching, and then the long-term part-time rules are changing again next year, and that's going to impact any plans you have with part-time employees. But it really will have a major impact for those of you that have clients with single or solo Ks, uni Ks, whatever you want to call them, one-person 401ks. Because if the owner had a part-time employee or has a part-time employee that could have been excluded with the 1,000-hour rule, they may not be with this long-term part-time anymore, and the single K that they've enjoyed may not work going forward. So you may have to engage with a TPA to get the 5,500 and everything else started. But that again becomes effective next year. All right, I'll take a breath, see if there are any questions, because I can't see you all on the screen because I'm in presentation mode. So if I don't hear anything in the next 5 seconds, I'll keep going. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to take a sip of coffee. Okay, so some of the things that are working are auto enrollment, very popular. Again, I mentioned earlier, the millennials have gotten used to this. There was a big concern that, auto enroll me, and it was negative elect originally. And I know Ari has referred to, his initial reaction to this being like, communism. What are you're going to take money out of my paycheck without my consent? Well, it turns out it was people were concerned really about nothing, because people did have the opportunity to opt out. And a lot of people didn't even notice. And you see in the lower right, 88% of employees who are auto-enrolled don't opt out. Once they see the money accumulating, they see it going into their, for their benefit, especially if there's a matching contribution on top of it. So it's been a huge benefit to closing the coverage gap and getting people in the plan. Roth, if your plan doesn't have a Roth, it should, in my opinion. The Roth feature, it gives the participants the ability to diversify their tax base in retirement, have some pre-tax, have some after-tax. It's a great estate planning option because the money that comes out is tax-free, not only for yourself, but if you pass away, for your beneficiaries. So why not leave the money behind tax-free for your kids from an income tax point of view? Now, 87% of plans now offer a Roth option, but only 27% of participants are using it. So again, it's very beneficial for the younger workers, and it could be a very nice estate planning strategy for older workers. But either way, it's a good tax diversification tool, because it doesn't have to be all Roth or all pre-tax. If you're putting in 6% of pay, you could do 4% pre-tax, 2% Roth, or 3 and 3, or 5 and 1, whatever you want to do. So it certainly has its advantages. Participant engagement is also something we talked about. How do we get participants engaged? The urgency is there to engage participants. A lot of people think they know what they're doing, in terms of saving for retirement. I've heard Ari on his podcast, talk about a coworker that thought they had the market covered because they were invested in a mid-cap fund, because that covered the middle of the market. Well, we know that's not how a mid-cap fund operates. It's companies that are mid-size, not the middle of the market. But 73% of workers think they will work in retirement, while only 23% report doing so. So, people have this idea that they know what they're doing. They're going to keep doing it. They're going to keep engaged in the plan. And it turns out they may get laid off. They may not have a job. They might not be able to find it. They underestimate the amount of money they'll need. You have out-of-pocket expenses for healthcare, $315,000. Most people think it's $41,000. 7 in 10 people will require long-term care. So the urgency to get them in the plan, to keep them educated. This goes to the point I was making earlier with the person that was talking about the mid-cap fund. 4 in 10 participants who rated themselves with high investment knowledge scored poorly on a basic financial literacy quiz. 17% are not deferring enough to get the full company match, and 29% are deferring at the match threshold. So 46%, if I have that math right, are either at or below the match rate and don't go higher. And then we talked about Social Security. 25% of women, and they live longer, than men. That's a whole different presentation as to why. But 25% of women take Social Security at age 62, 23% of men. And the earlier slide on Social Security showed that over a lifetime, if you live to your average life expectancy, that could have a significant impact over your total income in retirement. Now, retirement planning topics that participants are most interested in, broken out by age. You can see Social Security is among the top 3 by people age 40 and older. Investment selection is among the top 3 by younger workers. Healthcare costs in the top 3 for older workers. Tax implications, older workers. How to convert my retirement savings to income, again, older workers. How much to save for retirement and which accounts to use, pre-tax or Roth. Younger, people are more concerned. So you can see if you're gearing up for an education meeting and you're doing it by age bands, you can see what topics are of the most interest based on the demographics of your plan sponsor client. Financial wellness programs, employers will tailor their programs to different, types of employees. The most common, which we just showed on the previous slide, is by age. Oops, sorry about that. Let me go down. The most common is by age. The next one, hey, if you're not saving, if you're saving below a certain rate, they have targeted. By gender, women in investing, there's different topics specific to women and the challenges they face due to less time in the workforce, lower pay, longer life expectancy. That's a whole different topic of education. Or some of them break it out by location. We'll talk about HSAs in a moment, or you could do it by salary or job title. Now, HSAs, if you're not familiar with them, you really should be, because they're a huge advantage for saving for retirement. The employer must have a high deductible health plan, though, to have a health savings account. Now, they're not like the flex savings accounts where those, if you didn't use it, you lose it. HSAs, if you don't use it, it's yours. You can invest these dollars. So this is where you put money aside on a pre-tax basis. It grows tax deferred. Well, it grows actually tax-free, because if you use the money when you take it out for healthcare related expenses, you don't pay tax. So it's triple tax advantage: tax deductible, tax deferred growth, and tax-free withdrawals if used for medical expenses. So it's basically a Roth with a deduction if you use it for healthcare expenses. Now, here are the contribution limits. Well, you know what? We only put the employee on here. We didn't do the family. So it's $7,400 for family. And I apologize for this. I didn't realize this because we just came out with this slide, so I'll update this. But it's in the mid 7,000s for a family plan. Individuals can put 4,150, and if you're 55, not 50, 55 or older, you can do an additional catch-up contribution. Now, you can use this to pay for medical expenses. You'll get a debit card where you can charge medical expenses and just pay at the register at CVS or your co-pays. Some will save up for healthcare expenses that they're expecting, like elective surgery, and others use it like a retirement supplemental account. They just keep accumulating it. And you can invest it in stocks, bonds, mutual funds, depending on your HSA provider. So funded emergency savings. So this is the order that is generally thought of is if you're just starting out, create an emergency savings account for yourself. Put money into your 401k up to the match, fund your HSA, and then anything additional goes back into the 401k is the most effective from a tax and financial wellness point of view. I do want to touch on the HSA very quickly, though. One strategy that is exceptionally effective that a lot of people don't know about, and I'm doing it right now. I'm in the last year of doing this. So my daughter is 25, and we've done this for 3 years now. So my daughter is 25. We no longer claim her as a dependent. So she cannot utilize my wife and I's HSA dollars because she's not a dependent. So the HSA, you can only use those dollars for yourselves or dependents. But my daughter's still covered under our health insurance policy, but she has no access to an HSA, but yet she's covered under an HDHP. So she can create her own health savings account. And because she's covered under a family plan, she can contribute the family amount. So you have a 25-year-old that can contribute $7,400 to an HSA. So she did that, 23, 24, and 25. So that's 3 years at 7,000 plus. So she had, and it was deductible. So that's $22,000 that she has that will grow. 8,300 for the family on the HSA. Thank you, Mr. Webb. So, take those numbers, extrapolate them for the past 2 or 3 years, and it adjusts every year that my daughter's been able to do, and then get 40 years of tax-free growth. It's an amazing loophole in the rule that if you have adult children that aren't claimed as dependents and you're covered under an HDHP, they stay on your insurance till age 26. So my daughter, don't join the company's health plan. Cost savings to her right there because you're still covered under mom and dad's. So it's worked out really well. So just adult children have a huge benefit, in terms of that. All right, so let's move on from HSAs. Plan governance. 5 primary responsibilities for fiduciaries. Operate the plan solely in the best interest of participants, not in the employer's interest. So you have an inherent conflict right there sometimes where the employer is making a decision that might benefit them more than the employees. They always have to opt on the decision-making of the participants. Oversee plan expenses paid by the plan and participants. One of the easiest ways to avoid this, especially in the small business marketplace, is have the company, the employer, pay the plan expenses. It'll be tax deductible to them. It's a business expense. Plus, if there's a basis point fee coming out of the plan assets to pay plan expenses, who pays the majority of that? The people with the largest account balances. Who are they? It's usually the people that are across the table from you, when you're talking to, setting up the plan or doing the reviews. So Mr. or Mrs. Owner, you're paying 65 basis points for all services for this plan. That's coming out of your account. If the business pays for it, that 65 basis points stays in your account and the business gets a write-off. So, but if any fees are coming out of the plan, there is a fiduciary duty to review the plan, make sure they're reasonable. It doesn't have to be the lowest cost. You have to make sure that the services and value for the fees are reasonable. Meet the prudent man rule. Hey, does this make sense? Does this follow logic? With a similar prudent person act in this situation? Minimize risk through diversification, especially on the investment menu. That is a very low hurdle. It's stocks, bonds, cash, at least 3 materially different risk return characteristics, and follow the terms of the plan document. This is a big one. You know, Ari talks about this with his plan checkup, with his plan reviews, and the biggest mistake he sees is that the definition of compensation in the document does not match how the employer is operating the plan, whether they're excluding certain types of compensation from, you know, profit sharing or the match, whether it's bonuses or fringe benefits. So you have to make sure that the document aligns with how you're running the plan. Effective plan government starts with documentation and meeting minutes and having committees, having a charter that outlines, you know, who are the fiduciaries, what are the committees going to be responsible for, how often will they meet, retaining meeting minutes. This is key. When you're taking meeting minutes, don't put specific people names in there that, you know, John Doe said this, because if you're managing larger plans and there's ever litigation, you know, the plaintiff's attorneys are going to go back and read those minutes, and they're going to call John Doe and say, hey, John Doe, in this committee meeting on, you know, the first quarter of 2016, you stated this. Well, that was 8 years ago or 5 years ago, whatever the time frame is. You know, John Doe's not going to remember what they said 2 weeks ago. So you want to frame it with committee members questioned, you know, this, or the committee asked, and avoid using specific language. It's almost like an investment policy statement where you want to be general and not too specific, but make sure your minutes reflect the vigor and the depth of the conversation without getting too specific on names, because they will get called onto the stand if there's ever litigation, if you're in the large plan marketplace. Have fiduciary training for members at least once a year, going through that. Make sure they know what they're there for and what their responsibilities are. Then you know, set the agenda for the meeting. Make sure that it flows, that you spend time on plan governance, on plan documents, on education, on investments, on your QDIA, on your fees. So we have this in the presentation. And then the last slide that I have is, you know, in ERISA, the different types of co-fiduciary services where you can outsource. Now, there's still advisors out there that will look a plan sponsor in the eye and say, if you hire me as a fiduciary, you have no fiduciary responsibility. They're either very misinformed or they're just outright lying. You know, the only way for a plan sponsor to have no fiduciary responsibility is to not have a plan. If you offer a plan, you are a fiduciary as a plan sponsor, even if you hire a co-fiduciary, whether it's a 338 or a 321 or a 316. I'm a Mets fan, so I use the story of the New York Mets. Whatever can go wrong does go wrong, both on the field and off the field. The Mets hired a 338 co-fiduciary. They had a $16 million plan at the time. $4 million of that was invested with their 338 co-fiduciary, who they gave full discretion to manage that money. They had a $2 million fidelity bond on the plan in case there was any act of fraud or embezzlement or any misappropriation of funds. So they thought they were buttoned up. That 338 co-fiduciary that they hired to handle that, you know, $4 million on a discretionary basis was Bernie Madoff. So the participants sued the Wilpons and won. The fidelity bond kicked in for $2 million, but for the other $2 million, the participants sued and won that. So hiring a 338 is not a panacea that's going to give you ultimate protection. You still have to monitor and review the actions of that co-fiduciary, whether it's a 316, whether it's a 321, whether it's a 338. That goes for your investments. That goes for your record keeper. If you have managed accounts, that's a fiduciary decision. If you have a self-directed brokerage account, that was a fiduciary act. If you have an auto rollover IRA provider, you have to document how you selected them. So it goes beyond investments and admin. So yeah, I won't go through this. This is cyber security risk and what's going on in that space as well. That's a new section for the DOL. So here's the disclosure slide. If anybody is from the legal department at your firms, there's our disclosures, and that's it. So my last minute here, I just want to make you aware of a new investment option. It's hit its 3-year track record. If you are have CNBC, Fox Business, or Bloomberg on, every 8 minutes you will see a commercial for QQQ. the NASDAQ 100, the Qs offered by Invesco. It's a $200 billion ETF. Fantastic performance in terms of the large growth category. You can, look that up and run it against any other large growth investment. You'll be pleasantly impressed with the percentile rankings. So we created a mutual fund version specifically for defined contribution plans. It's IVNQX. So I, as in Invesco, V as in Victor, N as in Nancy, Q as in QQQ, X, because every mutual fund ticker symbol ends in an X. It's been around for 3 years and 3 months now, so it has its 3-year track record. So a lot of fiduciaries will require a mutual fund to have a 3-year history. But take a look at that fund. This is my commercial for your large growth. If you want to go passive or to complement a more conservative large growth, it is the Qs in the mutual fund form. So I would invite you to take a look at that as an option to consider. So Ari, I'll stop there. I think I'm right at 12:30 or maybe a minute or two over.
Yeah, I'm just going to make my snide comment. The commercial always reminds me of the events where you couldn't do the commercial. You spend the money to be here, and you can't. Well,
yeah.
That's just me snide, and that's my humor.
Yeah. So
thank you,
if anybody
Bill.
has questions, I'm happy to take questions.
No, everybody, they're asking about the slides. If you can provide the slides, or is it or is it like the Colonel's secret recipe?
Well, I can email the slides out to anybody that wants them. So just email me. I will give you my email right now. So pens up, ready, or keyboard ready. It's William.Schories, SCHORIES @Invesco.com. So William.Schories @Invesco.com. Not Bill Schories, so formal, like you're my parents. So William.Schories @Invesco.com. Just email me and I'll send you the full-blown presentation that covered all of that. And I apologize that we did not have the family limits for the HSA in there. We just got the presentation updated yesterday for 2024, and I didn't catch that. So I don't know if the version I'll send you will have that, but Mike Webb was not kind enough to jump in and with the $8,300 limit for HSAs. We have a question in the chat here. Yes, any thoughts on Bitcoin ETF? I think Invesco has one. Yes, Invesco does have one. It's the Invesco Galaxy Bitcoin ETF. My personal thoughts as it relates to 401ks, and again, this is my personal thoughts, not Invesco's thoughts, because Invesco obviously launched an ETF on this. My personal thoughts are, because ERISA states that an investment has to be a prudent long-term investment, I don't know that we're there yet with ETFs. There was an article this morning, I think, that Vanguard is calling the the Bitcoin market immature. So I would at least wait till these ETFs have an operating history of 3 years. Since they were approved by the SEC, you kind of have the regulatory blessing at this point now to fall back on, to say, hey, under ERISA, this is a prudent long-term investment. It was approved by the regulators in January of 2024. Even though crypto and Bitcoin have been around for a while, I'm still a little hesitant on it being thrown in as an option, as a fiduciary, if I were a fiduciary on a plan. There are providers. For Us All is a 401k provider that allows Bitcoin. Fidelity, I believe, allows it. And people can access it if you offer a self-directed brokerage account, if you don't restrict it. So it is doable. Just my own, again, Bill Shorey's personal opinion. If I'm a fiduciary, I'm holding off right now for a couple of more years until it has that 3-year, 4-year track record with the SEC's, regulatory blessing.
I think it's inevitable. That's how I say it.
Exactly. I just think it's a little
inevitable, and it's just, and then the problem now is, if you have self-directed brokerage accounts, what do you do? Because, people want to invest in it.
And you can offer a brokerage account and block access to that if you want to, right, as a plan sponsor, but that's a plan by plan, advisor decision.
They don't want to say no. So
right.
So thank you, Bill, once again. And next is Alex Sanchez from Pension Assurance. People hate audits.
Exactly right.
People hate plan audits. But when it comes to auditors, I always like firms that's all they do, because if that's all they do, That's all they do, and it makes things a lot easier than hiring some of those big accounting firms, and you get a bill for like $60,000 when you thought the bill was going to be about a third of that. So, Alex, take it away.
Thank you, Ari. Thanks for having me. Thanks for setting this up, this virtual conference. Bill, that great information. That was very informative. I can attest to a lot of the things that you mentioned when it comes to what can go wrong with a 401k plan. Can everybody see the screen that I'm sharing, the presentation?
Yes.
Yeah, we could
Yep,
see it.
looks
It's
good.
just not. Yeah, is that
Perfect.
in a PDF?
It's a PDF. Yeah,
Okay. Yep.
it's
Okay.
not a traditional slide deck, but it's a
That's fine.
pain-free plan audits. That's the
I can see it.
title of my presentation. Thank you, Ari. And so don't want to spend too much time, giving too much jargon on audits. I know I don't want to bore you to death today, but just want to spend 10 to 15 minutes to talk about really traditional CPA firms and how they differ from us. And it'll only take 10, 15 minutes to really explain it and kind of paint a picture of who we are and what we're all about. Little about me. Big sports fan. I'm a 49ers fan and Atlanta Braves fan. So sorry, Bill, for the years that we've had the battles over the years. It's been fun to watch. I was a 90s kid. So growing up in the 90s, it was all about the Braves on Turner Sports. And I lived and was raised in Florida. So the Marlins didn't exist till mid 90s. So I grew up watching the Braves on TV and it stuck. And then the Niners got a lot of nervous energy right now with the game coming up this Sunday, hoping that they can pull it out. I've been, it's like we've knocked on the door every year and fallen short. So hoping we can break through this season. But spent 20 years in California, moved when I was 17 to California. Went to Cal State Long Beach, got my QKA, even though I'm a CPA, got my QKA because really focused and dedicated to this space. Love it. Do this 365 days out of the year, just like everybody else at our firm. Firm started 10 years ago. It'll be 10 years in November. So celebrating our 10-year anniversary, started with about 125 plans that were spun off from a traditional CPA firm and have grown to the point to where we're doing 900 plans. We did 900 plans last year. We'll probably broach 1,000 plans this year. That's our goal. Started out in California and now we've become more national, trying to build that footprint out east. And that's part of the reason for my move recently. Moved 3 years ago with my wife back to Florida. I'm in Boca Raton, just north of Fort Lauderdale. But we service and have Nexus to serve accounts anywhere in the country. We're a specialized 100%, as I mentioned it, focused on EBP audits, which is very different from what you see out there in CPA firms. I'd say probably 99% of the firms that you see out there that are CPA public accounting firms do a little bit of everything. They do corporate audits, corporate tax work, they do consulting, SOX work, and then EBP is just a small subset of what they do. So with us, you call us in February, March, middle of tax season, we'll pick up the phone and answer any questions with regards to retirement plan audits, and we'll even start them as soon as February and March, whenever the record keepers are ready to go. Challenges with the traditional model. So when we say traditional model, it's what I had explained. Traditional firms that do have all sorts of service revenues linked to them. So this is what happens. We've got EBPs are typically marginalized at firms like this, traditional firms. They reserve their top talent for the high risk, high priority, high margin type engagements. So you see projects like corporate audits, technical compliance, consulting, they require more experience. So you're going to have a 5 to 10 year experienced individual, pretty much their A-list team members hopped on and put on these engagements, right? And so what happens with the middle priority and the low priority projects? The middle priority projects like tax engagements, internal audit support, they're the more boilerplate engagements that happen every year at the firm. They tend to have more mid-level staff, 3 to 5 year experience people. Okay, so what happens with the EBP audits, right? You can't spread your A-list people too thin, right? So the people that are executing these plan audits are going to be your interns, your staff that are 1 to 3 year people that are learning the audit lingo, learning how to audit straight out of school, so they can be developed and turned into professionals that can work on these high priority engagements in the future. So what happens then? You've got high turnover, and the service level goes down for these EVP engagements. So, which leads to this section here. So service suffers. What types of stories, have we heard time and time again from plan sponsors when it comes to these 401k audits? It's like, it's the 9th hour, it's October, first week of October, and the audit's still not done. Plan sponsors have to file late and have to go through that fire drill every year, because there's only a 2 to 3 month allocation for a firm to work on these audits. And so clients are pigeonholed and forced to focus on this audit whenever the CPA is ready to go. And it tends to be too late if there are any issues that pop up during the engagement. Needless, never-ending hassles. So you tend to have similar requests every single year because you have different interns or staff members on the audit time and time again every single year. They're going off of a checklist, and they're asking the same questions over and over because it's the same checklist. They're not revamping things because they don't have time to, right? And so, another thing that I get from plan sponsors, I feel like I'm training my 401k auditor and it's different person every time, and so speaking to the turnover. So what's our solution to the traditional model? What was our answer? And it's really the power of focus. Our founding partners, John Russin and Nathan, are partners that had a vision back 10 years ago that said, the DOL is striving and pushing for audit quality. They keep putting on the audit quality studies that are done every few years, and they keep pointing to expertise being the key to having less deficiencies with these audits that are performed. So the power of focus is huge, right? Because auditing of retirement plans is all we do. The singular focus has skyrocketed our capabilities. It deepens your knowledge when you're focused on one thing. There's continuous improvement because we have an actual slow season, right? From November to February, people ask, what do we do? What do we focus our time and energy on when we're not doing these audits for EVPs? And so the thing is, we have about 8 to 10 practice building teams within the firm that all have a focus on a specific area and how to build the firm and make it better. So I'm part of the client experience team, where we put out a survey after every audit and we ask, hey, what did we do? What did we do wrong? What could we do better? How did we do? And so we really take these responses every year. It's usually about a 10% response rate, but it's really great information, right? Where we can take that and use the off season to really think about how we can improve every facet of what we do, right? So that's the client experience. We have a tech team, we have a social media team, a team that focuses on sales and marketing. And so everybody has a passion for something within the firm aside from auditing and being that CPA. And so we really, dive into that, and everybody feels empowered to roll up their sleeves and do what they can to help out the firm in any way that they can. And so that's what makes it fun. And then we have allies in the industry because we've seen it all. We've worked with all types of providers. We work alongside with advisors, TPAs, record keepers, ERISA attorneys, everybody that makes up really a team. It's not one person that makes a plan run to the best of its ability. It really takes a village to make it work. And so we love to partner up with service providers and make life easier for the HR person, the CFO, the controller, by putting all our requests out there. And I'd say about 80% of the stuff that we request is going to come from a service provider. So it limits that PBC list, that provided by client list that is required from HR. And so the plan sponsor, at the end of the day, they've got so many things they're worried about during the day besides the 401k plan that when they're done with our audit, what we want to hear at the end is that, hey, Kevin, I think you've got you're unmuted. There's some background.
This call may be monitored.
Yeah, please unmute. Okay, I think
there we go. Thanks, Kevin. So yeah, allies in the industry, it's a big thing because whenever something does go wrong, which inevitably it does, we know who can answer the question, answer the call, whether it's a TPA doing a calculation or an ERISA attorney like Ari that can help out in a situation that requires more detailed analysis and more firepower at the end of the day. The power of experience. So this is a good graphic that I thought would be good to share because it really shows if you've got a 5-year person at a traditional firm versus a 5-year person at Pension Assurance, you've got a person that worked 10 months out of the year on EBP audits versus a traditional firm where they will only work on EBPs for 3 months out of the year. When you extrapolate that to 5 years in, it's night and day, the gap between that experience from a pension assurance employee professional versus a traditional firm. I experienced it myself for 15, 16 years at a traditional firm. I was bouncing around from corporate audits, nonprofit engagements, and switching over to EBP audits. And I was just exhausted. It was like by the end of the year, I just wanted a couple of weeks. And so, I never really had work-life balance until I found pension assurance. And so, it's a big deal when you're talking to, you're not really comparing apples to apples when you're thinking about traditional firm versus a single focused firm like ours. So if somebody says, oh, we'll put a manager on your audit, yeah, but how much experience does that manager have, and to bring to our audit or to our company? What this single focus has done too, and that's been a great part of our reason for being able to scale, is that we do provide the work-life balance. So for CPAs across the country, they didn't know, they haven't known of a firm like Pension Assurance that just focuses on EBP audits. And so I didn't know before, getting connected through a couple TPAs with John Rustin, the founding partner, 5 years ago, that Pension Assurance even existed. And so we found that that's been the case across the country. There's very few providers, if any, in any given state that just focus on this and share our model. So, we've been able to acquire talent from all over, from experienced, very highly talented individuals that have 5-10 years experience and are just tired of the public accounting world, but they enjoy serving plan sponsors and companies, and so they want to stay in public accounting, but they just can't find a way to make the family life work-life balance and be able to find an opportunity that works for them until now. So we've got people. When I first started 5 years ago, we only had one individual outside of California. Now 35% of our workforce is outside of California in just a short 5 years. I think the pandemic also made that happen because all audits are done remotely. So I had clients from LA to Florida. How does all this benefit you? And when I say you, it's really the plan sponsor. Peace of mind. When the DOL inspects our work every few years because we do so many plan audits, and we get a clean bill of health. When they see the 5500 and they see Pension Assurance, they know the audit's being done by a reputable firm. And so you don't want your client to be at risk by working with, a friendly CPA that's willing to handle their 401k audit because they want to keep the client happy. But, inherently they've got maybe, less than 5 plans that they audit every year. And so they're spending a couple hundred hours on the engagement, whereas we spend average 60 hours, right? And putting the client at risk because they don't know what they don't know, right? So, but at the end of the day, it's peace of mind. We're not adversarial. We're there to try and find what the issues might be, what they could be, what they are, and get them fixed promptly before they become a major issue. And so the good thing with 401ks is that any operational error that occurs, it's fixable. There's a way that it can be fixed. But if you let it string on for too long, there's no statute of limitations when it comes to these things. So if there's like a definition of comp error that goes back 10 years, the DOL could investigate, go in and go back all those 10 years. It's not like it's limited to 3 years or 7 years or anything like that. So it can become a big deal if you just don't nip it in the bud as soon as you can. And then, a can-do, fix-it attitude. We don't really just look to check a compliance box and get the audit done every year, but we love when a plan sponsor treats us as a partner and calls us whenever there's an issue throughout the year. Because we do this all year round, all our education, our continuing ed is focused around retirement plans. We also do we go to every conference out there as much as possible. I think we're signed up for about 8 to 10 EBP related conferences this year. So everyone's trying to learn what everybody else in the industry is doing to increase their tools in their toolbox. And so it just makes for just a more robust product, if you will. Faster to your finish line. So this is another, how do we stack up? How do we stack up when it comes to traditional firms, when it comes to pricing? People ask all the time, are you going to be way more expensive than that inexperienced firm? And the answer to that is no, because we're very efficient at what we do, and we've seen it all and done it all. When it comes to the plan audits, we don't take as long to get them done. And so, the fees are reasonable. We're smooth and quick, so efficiency is there. We talked about the hours. Staff experience, we touched on that. Highly experienced versus lots of on-the-job training and learning for a traditional firm employee. And then we make the audit experience as enjoyable as it can be by, not really going through that mundane checklist, but only asking the questions that we know need to be asked and covered, right? And so, and then going through the service providers, or like the advisor, we'll reach out to the advisor for the minutes because we know they have the meeting minutes. We don't have to go through the plan sponsor for that information. And so that's basically it. Specialization matters at the end of the day. So that's what we're all about. If you've got questions.
We have a couple of questions. You clearly audit MEPs and PEPs, right? I don't want to speak for you, but I assume that you do.
Yes, we do. We're building out a model to even, because I know they're becoming more and more popular now than ever. So definitely reach out and we'll talk pricing on those. I know that's one thing that for auditors in general, it's hard to price out because the DOL hasn't really come up, and the standards haven't really come out as far as how we need to audit these, and if we need to audit every individual employer in the PEP, or if we can sample every 3 years for those small ones. So that's what we're trying to iron out. But yeah, definitely entertaining them.
Okay, and so Fran, reach out to Alex on pricing. And how do you leverage technology to simplify and shorten the audit process?
Yeah, so we have our own audit methodology that we create. We don't go off of a bookshelf software, and so we always tweak and we could go out to the market and sell this thing to other CPA firms, but that's not something we want to do. So we keep it very proprietary, and our goal is to take this to the national level and just continue to grow.
Sounds great. Alex,
Thank you,
always
Ari.
great seeing you. Last time I saw you was in
Likewise.
Miami. Yeah.
I know it was.
And hope to see you around. And again, it's always a great presentation from Pension. And tell John I said hello.
I will. Thank you.
Not a problem. And next is Ed Dressel from Retire Ready. And
nice to see you, Ari.
Same here. We'll see. I'll see you in New York. So again, I didn't push the events, but we're coming back with live events finally. I realized last year nobody wanted to go to Oakland, nobody wanted to go to Detroit, so we're doing Yankee Stadium in June, and everybody's excited about that. And we're doing in May, we'll be in Arlington, Texas. So Ed, I'll see you there, and of course at the game. It's gonna be
I'm
Dodgers,
looking forward to it. New York, I love the city. It's a great place.
I haven't been to Yankee Stadium in 5 years, but that's a whole nother story.
I think it's probably might have been at the same game then. I was about there 5 years ago with my boys, so it was a great place.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Go all the time to the Mets, but Citi Field, Yankee Stadium is a whole nother story. So Ed, take it away.
Yeah, and just for the record, go Detroit for this weekend. I love the underdog. Fun story. I want to talk a little quickly about leveraging your 401k plan and education to protect you in the future. Like what's going to happen down the road, and how do you do that? Not only can it protect you, I think, and I'll provide plenty of anecdotal on this. Increase your assets under management, significant increase. One of my favorite stories, or heartbreaking stories, is Richard. A few years ago, we were having dinner with his family, He's a 60-year-old journeyman at a grocery store, great guy, blue collar, hardworking American, enjoying dinner, having a lot of laughs. And then I turned to Richard, being 60. I said, "Hey, Richard, what's retirement look like for you?" I wanted his vision, his passion, what he was going to do with his time. Richard said, "I should probably start saving." And it just kind of broke my heart because it's like I had a hard time. I choked on my tongue, couldn't say what I was thinking. And it was like, wow, those were words hard to hear because I love Richard. Richard's a great human being. He's got a great family. He just never engaged in the 401k contribution at work. You know, that happens all across America. I've seen the studies. I'll share one in a little bit. But Richard's a great guy. But a lot of people are going to go, you know, when they get to 60, 65, they're going to say, what can I do? And one of them is they're going to go after malpractice. They're going to say, I wasn't taught, I wasn't engaged. I was never told. Basically, they're going to go to Las Vegas and play the lottery on their 401k plan with an attorney and see if you can fund their 401k plan now rather than them funding it earlier. This is and it only takes a few bad apples to make our lives miserable. It's like, I don't want that. And helping you engage them in an individual way. This problem is well known. It shows up in cartoons. This is a cartoon from a few years ago. Show it up in the cartoon, and people just don't understand retirement. It's like, you've confused me with your words. I don't understand a thing you're saying. I'm overwhelmed. Hold on to that thought. We're going to talk about that. But that has a consequence. This has a consequence with people across the table not understanding how well they comprehend it. It's like, I wish you would just talk my language. The end result, and I hope the audio comes across here, is a video I saw for a Super Bowl a few years ago.
Yeah, not hearing it. Oh,
Basically, the song says, I'm 85 and I want to go home. And this guy is working a lot later in life than he wants to. And it's not, all these people are working much later in life, and it creates a problem. It's getting old, and he's a firefighter. It's like, and helping them retire. This last year, a quote from John Sullivan, chief editor in the American Retirement Association. John made this quote: the damage of over-reliance and jargon can do harm to a participant, and by extension, the advisor's business. Still, another survey came in and said the same thing. And here's a closing comment. It might make the advisor sound smart while making the client anxious and overwhelmed, and some will argue it's intentional. Incredible quote by John, still happening. We know the jargon, we've been taught the jargon, we bring it to the table, and nobody wants to open a dictionary when they're studying their 401k plan. And the end result is you're 85 and you're still working. Or you have a participant meeting where people aren't engaged. They don't understand it. That jargon is killing them. They just go, I don't understand the thing my advisor said, or they don't show up for the meeting. One advisor told me, when he got a brand new plan sponsor, nobody wanted to meet with me. Ramifications, and this is just a study from a few years ago from Vanguard, people aren't saving very much. But we look at those and we see all the data, but the real ramification comes to people like Richard, who are disengaged with it, or meetings where, hey, I don't get it. I'm not paying attention. And here's kind of the problem. We put a lot of information on the chalkboard, and we talk about all these aspects that are critical to the plan, but they're administrative. They're not engaging. What on the board would engage somebody? Market risk, maybe some of the more academics, but these are more the academic side, not the engagement side. And, oh yeah, we want to keep fees low. One of the advisors that uses us, Jonathan Schulteis in Greensboro, North Carolina, walks in the room and says, what's the important part of your retirement plan, your 401k? And people put what's on the board: fees, funds, fiduciary, asset allocation. They put that they say that those are the ones that are called out. Now, if you listen to those words, that's what they've been trained by the industry to say that's important. But the real importance, and Jonathan says, no, the important part of your retirement plan is, can you retire? Can you retire, and what does it look like for you? And helping them engage in that is a whole lot more important than all these other things. Now, these are more engaging. These are important. This is engaging. How do we get them engaged in the retirement planning process where people start saving? We have a pretty much a 1-page, and we're going to complement it with some auxiliary material, 1-page gap report. We keep it short on purpose and very engaging, helping somebody understand where they're at retirement and what they can do for it, and answer the question, can I retire? This can be created from imported census data and hitting print. You create one for each individual in the plan, and helping them understand the very typical gap report up top. Your money's going to last you 15 years and you're going to run out. People get that. They go, wow, I want to be able to fund my retirement longer. Down below, we're going to show them something even more engaging. We're going to illustrate their current take-home pay on their paycheck. We calculate that with their gross and their withholding information. If we get their withholding information, it can be pretty accurate, but it's always an estimate, and showing them the current contribution. And now we can talk about what happens if we increase their contributions. Because I remember one advisor a couple of years ago said, yeah, somebody stopped by when I was on site, said, what does it mean if I contribute 2% more to the plan? How does that impact my take-home pay? And he said, I have no idea. Well, that's what a participant wants to know. Here's the academic side. You need to go to 10, almost 11%. But here's the side that they get. It's going to cost you about $170 a paycheck. Now, if you're paying attention like you're a participant, most participants are going to go, I can't afford that. I get that. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But at least you've engaged them in a way that they go, hey, I can't afford retirement. And they're thinking about that. We're going to provide some other solutions. But they're engaged in a meaningful way. Down below, we're going to show them some other options. What happens if you wait a year before you do anything? It goes up to 11.3%, increase significant more contributions. Or option B, if you retire a year later, what does it mean? Or if you have an additional lump sum now, you've got another $115,000, $116,000, we can significantly fund that potential shortfall and give them in a 1-page report what retirement looks like and helping them understand. Now, the objections to this report, and the great objection is the increase is too much. I cannot afford it. Well, that is more engagement than a participant typically has. The other one is I have outside assets. What do I do with those? I'll give you a story about this. Gerald Wernette, and I'll share a story with him and just another story, a quote from him. But Gerald is with the Raymond Financial, and first time I met him, I said, tell me a fun story. I've been doing this for almost 40 years. That's embarrassing. Helping advisors since 1986, not quite 40 years, but helping advisors engage individuals about retirement. And when I'm getting my, I said, Gerald, tell me a fun story. And he said, I just rolled a simple plan into a K plan, 21 participants. Of the 11 contributing, I got them all to start making contributions and roll in their assets, which was elective. Of the other 10, he got them all to make contributions. And then he found $1.1 million, he found $1.5 million outside the plan, totaling $2.6 million. He started the plan with 21 employees. And when people think about, when you engage them in a way where they're thinking about their outside assets, not as something to fund you, but something to solve their retirement shortfall, it becomes a much more engaging, meaningful, educational exercise rather than a sales exercise. They don't see you as a threat. They see you as helping them. For the person who says, I can't afford the increase, we have a 2-page report that you can amend this with, showing them what does small steps, baby steps towards retirement success look like. Again, showing them their current take-home pay, but smaller increases. And I can't go up to 10.8%, but can you increase your take-home pay by 1% or 2%, and showing them the key steps. What does a 1% increase mean to them? So we could do auto escalation, but they're not engaged in an auto escalation. It's like, really, do they want to do it? In an engaged escalation, you can say, this year we're going to do 1, 2, or 3% increase, and next year we can revisit and see where we're at. Gerald's trainers, Bassem Malik, and Gerald has become a friend over the years. And I met Bassem at Gerald's office. He told me to stop by, and I asked Bassem for a fun story. He said 3rd year in a row we were going to Chicago. They're from Detroit area. He says we headed down to Chicago to the plan sponsor for the 3rd year. And we expected, first 2 years, significant increase in deferrals. 3rd year, we were anticipating the same level. And then we saw a significant increase in deferrals because people are taking baby steps every year. People can move it up a little bit. They just can't eat the whole elephant in one sitting. So helping them in an engaged way. We're not just going to move you up the 1% that the auto escalation does, but we could go 2 or 3. Can you afford $50 or $75 a paycheck? And they know the impact on their take-home pay, and they have meaningful information. We're going to be able to show them the current at different contribution levels, different rates of return, potential values at retirement, and show them that, you know, if you go to increase by 3% at a 6% pre-retirement rate of return, you're going to have $1.4 million at retirement. But we're also going to be able to say, if you wait a year, that's going to cost you about $16,000. So that's $75 a paycheck's costing you $16,000. Or if you push it off 2 years, $32,000. So having a very attractive 2-page report, helping them understand. And if you put it all together, having these 3 pages of reports can help you engage your individuals in retirement, and every year bringing them information. So the person who hires the attorney and says, I want to play the lottery or the roulette wheel, as the picture would indicate, knowing if can I retire, or can I now use a legal access to fund my retirement? And they come after the plan sponsor or the advisor and they say, I wasn't educated well, I wasn't told. But you show them every year that you've been educating them, showing them what they need to do, and they have sat on their laurels. They didn't move the ball forward. Their chances of hitting the jackpot become a whole lot lower. Our focus and our purpose, we've been around the 403B world for that's when we started in the 1980s. We have a bunch of state pension plans we illustrate cash flow from. We were ranked as MetLife Resources, their 403B division, their top sales tool. And it was, we're doing on the 403B what we're doing in the 401k. We're answering questions that engage them. We're answering questions that they go, what engages the participant? Fees, funds, asset allocation, those are all important. They're critical in the background. But if you bring them to the forefront, it can create a problem. At what age can I retire? What does it impact my take-home pay? The most meaningful number they have is their take-home pay and their net pay on their paycheck. How are you going to impact that with increase in deferrals? You can show that on a report or in an engaged one-on-one interaction if you're doing one-on-one meetings. What's the impact of inflation? What's my longevity risk? These are all answers to questions we're going to provide an engaging way, and the Social Security questions that were brought up earlier, not just showing it in a generic way. And I love, the numbers are critical, but show them their numbers, show them the way it's going to impact them in a very efficient way for you, because you can't justify a lot of time, and a very meaningful way for the individual in a way that they get it. How do we help you succeed? Participant engagement. Participants are engaged, leaning forward. This wins you over with the plan sponsor. Plan sponsors, Gerald Wernette isn't worried about losing accounts. I'm going to share a quote with him on the next slide. I think it's the next slide. You're bringing value to the table. You're differentiating yourself. You're not commoditizing yourself and saying, well, we've got lower fees than the last guy. If that's your key selling point, the guy that comes in behind you, you're threatened by when he says, I can lower my fees more. You own the data and the process, not the record keeper. So you can create a process that you can reproduce every single time you go to a plan sponsor, whoever the record keeper is, because your engagement and education process can be exactly the same. And you're independent. You're not owned, trademarked, or branded by a record keeper, and we increase your AUM. Gerald Wernette, I've mentioned him a few times. He's become a friend over the years. He's out of Dearborn, Michigan. And he did a podcast with me. If you go to our podcast channel at retireready.com, this podcast, he's the very first one, which means he's the bottom of the list. The most listened to podcast I have. Had a lot of fun talking to him. He tells a bunch of great stories, but he talks about going into a hospital. And at the very beginning, before he started, there was no advisor before. And the penny pincher trustee says, Gerald, you need to lower your fees. He said, hold on to that thought for just a minute. Let me do my presentation, then I'll take your questions and concerns. He shows them the difference he's going to make on the educational process and what he's bringing to the table, and shows them how he's going to educate each employee in the hospital. And he says, what are the questions people have now? And that same trustee says, Gerald, I want to be sure your fees are high enough. I want you to stick around. And Gerald made this quote. You're not going to be able to hear it. He says, we're actually able to go in and raise our fees rather than lowering our fees. And that's part of the podcast. You can get the full context for that quote. Charlie Epstein of the 401k Coach made this quote. He was introducing me. I was doing a presentation with him a number of years ago, and he says, I've made more money from Track, and Track is our product, the last 20 years than any other solution I've ever used. And he's made it just the engaging and the understanding, where you go into a room and people are glad you're there, where participants are excited to go to the meeting with the advisor because you brought in and made a difference to them. They understand what they can do. And Gerald tells a story in one of the podcasts where he helps a lady divorced at 50 who never knew she could retire. She finds out she can retire. And her disposition around the office was so engaging that the plan sponsor, a couple of weeks after that podcast, said to him, Gerald, you've made a difference for the whole office. Because a good, happy employee about their finances, when they know they can retire, it changes the workplace, makes you popular with the plan sponsor, and down the road, it's going to protect you on it. The other part that I'd bring to the table is record keepers are cutting in line. I wrote, this is a title of a article I wrote for the 401k specialists, and they're walking and stepping in line and taking your business away as they get close to retirement. Now, I can't guarantee that the record keeper is not going to step in line and you can move them to retail if you're moving any of them to retail accounts. But I can tell you that at least you're on the radar for participants. Like, that advisor really helped me. And I asked Gerald, I don't have a recording of this, I've asked a number of advisors, Matt Monroe, Jonathan Schulteis, what's your conversion now to retail as people come up to retirement? And the conversion rates have a significant increase. Nobody shared data with me. I'd love to share numbers with you, but helping it out. But the bottom line, the part that makes me passionate about my job is people like Richard. We're going to reduce the number of individuals who are not engaged. We're going to increase the number of people that retire successfully. And I tell my employees, we're in the poverty alleviation business. We've seen a significant uptick this last year in our 401k reps. And I actually got a call from an advisor this year who was mad. He lost an account. He said, tell me what you do, because I lost an account because of your services. That another advisor came in and could make the difference. And I could tell anecdotal stories all day long, but helping individuals retire well helps you feel good. Down the road, when you've been doing the education, it makes a difference for the individuals, and long term, it protects you legally as you have pushed and promoted the education to individuals. I have time for a few comments or questions. Ari, have any questions come in?
No, they haven't, but I wanted to, it's something that I've mentioned in the latest article that I wrote comes out next 2-3 weeks. The education piece, I think that plan providers don't focus on. And again, it's like Bill said, it's that joke about my law firm, the guy in the office who told me I'm covered. I have 100% in the mid cap because that's the middle of the market. I think that, those type of employees, people focus too much on fees. They focus on, some other stuff that they don't need to focus on. And education to me is that one piece that I don't think a lot of plan providers focus on that really should, because to me, the more education people get, the better informed they are in making investment decisions. And that's the beauty of ERISA 44C. You give them enough info, they're on their own. If you don't give them enough info, you think they're on their own, but they're not. They're going to come after you one of these days.
The other part of that I'm losing my train of thought there. There was another part to that education piece. Make the education engaging. And a lot of advisors tell me, oh, we use the record keeper. Well, that's a passive way to do education. It's saying, hey, the most important question, I'm not going to answer. I'm going to defer, go out to the website and figure it out. I have a record keeper. I've never been able to figure out and I'm never comfortable with the way they analyze my data. And being proactive in the most important question in the room, which is, can I retire? Makes you a 401k superhero. And I'm borrowing that language from Jonathan Schulteis, and makes a difference and provides the legal protections, increase in assets under management, and also conversion to retail if that's in your wheelhouse. So yeah, we've seen a lot of success, and I have fun talking to advisors. Go ahead. Sorry.
Right. Again, I've been in this business 25 years. The one aspect of the retirement plan business I don't think has really really improved, except for a little here and there with technology, are the enrollment education meetings. And my joke is I've seen funerals that are more livelier than some of these education enrollment meetings. I mean, the
Oh
difference
my gosh.
between
You're,
a funeral and the education meeting is I've never seen anybody cry at education meeting. That's a major difference. So
I'm gonna use you're a quote house right there. I'll be using some of those quotes if you don't mind.
yeah, I mean, it's just like, I mean, I'm so like, and I've attended quite a few of these because you do, and it's just like I'm just most of the time just underwhelmed. I'm like, really, this is how we progressed all this technology? You would think, but whatever. That's just me being me and just being frank and honest and whatnot.
Well, I
So,
appreciate, yeah, and I like your honesty. It's part of the joy of doing business with you. And
well, you know, except when the times it gets me in trouble. Yeah.
I gave
ADP and
everybody
paychecks, ADP and paychecks won't be sponsoring any of my events anytime soon. No.
I gave everybody back about 5 minutes of their life. So if they want to take a minute and email me, you can grab the slide deck from me or get any questions, send them my way.
I
As
appreciate
usual.
it,
And
and I will see you in New York, the Bronx, not
I look
Bronx,
forward
the
to it.
Bronx, my ancestral home, as I always jokingly say.
All right. Well, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. And again, I'm you know, I got to plug these events, that 401ksite.com, sign up. We got just booked some more sponsors today for Yankee Stadium. We're also going to be in Arlington, Texas, which is always a lot of fun. We're coming back for the first time in 5 years almost. Texas Rangers, home of the Texas Rangers, and of course, home of the Yankees. And I just saw yesterday they changed their road uniforms for the first time in 51 years. But anyway, Greg Reed from Q3, you're up next. Well, no, I'm sorry, that's not right. Advis is next. So I all of a sudden I saw Greg Reed's photo. Greg around the screen. I'm sorry, Andrew Zito from Advis Financial Partners, talking about something that I've been working on with them for the past 6 months, among other things, right? Right, Andrew?
That is correct. Are you just trying to figure out how to share the right screen here? 1 second. Share screen.
Well, like I said, that400ksite.com for further information on all our live events. You can sign up today.
For some reason, my screen has gone into I don't want to cooperate mode. Stand by.
It's
Everybody.
it's always when you need it. It's never when you don't.
Everybody see that now?
I see it.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for having me. Ari, thank you for giving us the opportunity to have this conversation. My name is Andrew Zito. I have spent about 20-ish years or so working with qualified retirement plans on the advisory side. Spent a lot of time also on the TPA side, so have a fairly strong understanding of the ERISA piece of 401k plans. This isn't going to necessarily provide any I don't think any new information. I don't think it's going to, I'm hoping that some of the more seasoned 401k industry veterans on here shake their heads yes in agreement with some of the things I'm going to say. Some of it's lots of opinions. It's really intended to be sort of let's have an honest conversation about what pooled employer plans are really doing. We're about, if you take out the pandemic year, 2 years into pooled employer plans. They were authorized in 19. Nothing really happened in 19 or 20. It didn't really start to kind of come to life until 21 and 22. So we're really at that 2 and 3 year mark of whether, of what this sort of new thing is going to be. I assume that most folks on the call understand the fundamentals of pooled employer plans, but I'm going to kind of give you a quick run over them just so that in case there is somebody that's not familiar, I'm not talking Greek. So prior to the Secure Act 1.0, the one that came out in 19, if unrelated employers, smaller employers wanted to join forces with other employers, they had to do so through a MEP structure, and they had to have and this is some subject of some debate. They had to have some common nexus of industrial geographical area, et cetera. There were some limiting factors to the whole MEP situation. As part of their efforts to increase coverage for 401k plans to smaller employers, Congress sought to push the pooled employer plan, which is sort of a newly modified, sort of next generation version of a multiple employer plan. They introduced a lot of different requirements, one of which is that a PEP be run by a pooled plan provider, or as the industry has come to know them, Triple P. And that Triple P has to register with the Department of Labor as a pooled plan provider. So you can't just kind of walk off the street and say, I want a PEP. They were, again, as I said, originally intended to close that coverage gap. And they kind of quickly became, I remember hearing about this, like the sort of the next great thing for 401k plans. There was some panic inside some parts of the industry that they were going to take over. You know, I don't know that I ever bought into all of that, but, you know, they were billed as something that was going to be sort of industry changing. When Secure 2.0 came out in 22, there were some new rules passed on the PEP side. But most importantly, they increased or they extended the tax credits that are available for new plans, which are joining PEP. So if you start a PEP and you're an employer that doesn't have a plan, you can get to one of these tax credits. And that's actually really helpful for smaller employers. So the government is clearly sort of pushing these, at least the sort of legislative part of the government. Couple of benefits of pooled employer plans is one, a reduced potential fiduciary risk. So, you know, just like MEPs, there is a reduced risk because a lot of the responsibility for selecting the individual providers and for actually running the plan falls on the Triple P. There is less in-house administration. There's no real need to have ongoing committee meetings and fund reviews and all that. All of that stuff is done at the PEP level, not at the individual adopting employer level. Tax credits, as we talked about a minute ago, easier vendor relationships. It was meant to be sort of a little bit more of a turnkey, but most importantly, it was intended to allow smaller employers to take advantage of economies of scale from a cost perspective, right? That's the big thing. So if we blend together, we can get lower rates. And to that event, it has been somewhat effective. We'll talk about disadvantages. There are some critics of it, including the Department of Labor, who feel like PEPs are less flexible, which they are in some regards. But again, we're not trying to design the complicated plan. We're trying to expand coverage. Control, certainly. If you join a PEP, it's kind of an all or nothing situation. You know, you either select the vendors that they have or you don't. You know, again, choice in terms of what types of vendors, what things that you offer. I think that's sort of a redundant bullet point, if I'm being 100% honest. I don't know why I put it there. But, you know, for all of these critics, I think that we could spend a lot of time arguing back and forth. If you pop it into the internet, you'll get both opinions out there. I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about it. Okay, so here comes the real talk. Have they been successful? Again, we're 2 years into this, so it's a little bit early to tell. But the answer to the question is largely dependent on who you ask the question to. Certainly and predictably, the large behemoth providers have had no problem getting their PEPs off the ground. Aon recently announced in November that their PEP has exceeded $2 billion in assets. Aside from the fact that it's Aon and not Fidelity, I'm actually not 100% shocked by that because, I mean, these are megalithic organizations that have, you know, large sales forces and they have the access to these individual smaller employers to go ahead and pull them in really quickly. I can assure you, however, that Aon did not reach $2 billion by adding $2 million or, you know, by adding startup plans, $1 million plans, $800,000 and $900,000 plans. They have successfully convinced some larger employers, and this is something we should take note of, some larger employers that the PEP is the way of the future. And they've got plans in excess 20, 30, $40 million. And so in some cases, I think they've actually got like 100 or $200 million cases in there. Mercer, Paychex, ThriveWise, they've all sort of had similar success. Nobody quite to the excess that Aon has. Fidelity lagging a little bit behind, at least by the most recent 5,500 filings that I had. Independent PEPs, however, have missed the mark. So a little bit like puppies and dogs during the pandemic, and I hate to say this because I find it abysmal, but you know, everybody during the pandemic like raced out to get a dog, and then or a cat, and then realized, oh, okay, we can get back to life again. And suddenly that dog became less of a priority in life, and they weren't so excited about it. In the early days of the PEPs, there was this huge flood of smaller advisors, mid-sized advisors, and all these different types of firms going out and starting up PEPs. And that led to a huge increase in the registrations of pooled plan providers with the Department of Labor and all of that. Those PEPs have seen less traction. And there's a couple of reasons for that. We'll talk about them in a minute. I took a random sampling of 110 PEPs out of a database that we have. Of that 110 PEPs, the average plan size was $27 million. That list, however, included Aon and the big boys up at the top. So if I took those top 5, the average assets inside a PEP of that just random sampling of 110 was $7 million, which, if you spend any time in this industry, you know is not enough to sustain a huge economies of scale situation. 70 of those plans actually had less than $10 million in them. So the overwhelming majority of them, right? They were significantly outweighed. And this also should include, by the way, I should mention, some private PEPs that are out there for specific businesses. So my conclusion on this is it's too early to say that PEPs have failed, but it is safe to say that they aren't looking like quite the future of 401k plans that I think everybody kind of sort of built and thought that they would be. Now, having said that, what is the problem? Here's my my first take, and I'm going to rant a little bit here because I've been in this, and if you've been in this industry for a long time, you will agree with me. I know that. Number one, 401k plans are not easy. And I take personal offense when some of these startup companies, I'm not going to name the one that starts with a human and ends with an interest, but like some of these companies make it seem as though you can buy a Lego set and start a 401k plan, and that somehow the PEP process or the PEP mechanism is this magical system in which you put a 401k plan in there and all the complexities that come along with running a 401k plan disappear. They don't. We sell it as if they are less work on the employer, which they are, but that work doesn't go away. It just gets pushed to a different organization. The complexities of 401k plans are embedded in the DNA of 401k plans. We all know that. Take 10 plans, line them up. They're all different. And everyone has its own unique set of things. And each employer will come up with its own unique way of ruining everything and complicating everything. And so part of the problem is this thought process that, these advisors who wanted to be 401k advisors, well, we'll just start a PEP and suddenly everything will go away. It's nonsense. It's never there. We need to kind of try and stop oversimplifying what these MEPs are intended to do, right? We need to stop believing that if we put a plan in a MEP, everything is great. We don't have to worry about it again. Number two, not all retirement plan advisors are plan advisors. Okay, we all know the industry is full of advisors who are more focused on the individual side of things, but have found niches in small pockets of 401k plans. And I think those folks are sometimes the ones that felt like starting a PEP was a really good idea and are now finding out that it's harder than they thought. The Department of Labor also does not love PEPs. I think it has something to do with the offloading of fiduciary responsibility. Ari, feel free to weigh in here if you've got an opinion on why you think it is. But the Department of Labor has sort of made it relatively clear through some of their actions that they don't love the whole PEP concept. I
just want to say it was forced upon them by Congress, because if you remember, they had the advisory opinion in 2012 that said, if you're unrelated employers, you're not a single plan. And then Trump, when president, said, I want you to put out regs. And the Department of Labor's regs regurgitated the 2012 opinion. So this was done, and the Department of Labor still doesn't like it. That's how I feel.
Yeah, the Department of Labor really did have this forced upon them, as Ari said. And so, I don't totally agree with the Department of Labor's opinion, but I think to a certain degree, the Department of Labor is reacting to what I said a second ago, which is that I think these PEPs and some of the people championing them are kind of oversimplifying it. And I think the Department of Labor fears that some of the responsibility that is ingrained in running in a 401k plan will go away. Enough on that particular topic. We'll get back to it in a second. Fees matter. Okay. It's hard to be Costco when your footprint is the size of a local grocery store. Okay. You can't get the pricing economies of scale if you don't have the volume. Okay. So what happened here? Well, when all these folks went out and started to say, I want a PEP, they went to their providers and they said, I'm going to start a PEP. And the provider was like, well, all right, soldier, maybe, maybe not. But in order to get pricing, they had to promise certain volumes, right? They had to promise, well, we're going to grow this thing by X of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in the next year. And here's our thing. And then the provider comes back and gives them pricing. Certain providers were more open to the PEP thing. Certain providers were not. But in general, in order to get solid pricing, or at least competitive pricing, because remember, a PEP without competitive pricing is really just another 401k plan that's too expensive to join, you had to make some promises. And so I think some of the less experienced advisors in the space went out and made those promises. And, now they're kind of climbing that hill. And they are right where that hiker is. I didn't draw this, but I found the image and I feel like it was appropriate. They're looking at the steepest part of the curve and they don't have a lot of time left to get there. And so what happens is if you don't hit that critical mass and you don't get over the mountaintop, suddenly those PEPs are going to start to reprice. And suddenly the advisor or entity that started the PEP is going to have a problem on their hands because now they have, a PEP that is not priced properly. And they've made some promises to the employers about what that PEP is going to cost. And now they are, getting pressure from the provider itself. A lot of the providers were guarded about this and they wouldn't take on PEPs except for some experienced providers. And I applaud those vendors because they really did protect themselves from some issues. Some slipped through the cracks and y'all know who you are. And we'll be talking about that. So that's kind of why I think we haven't really been successful. There is one thing that I think I didn't speak about here, but I'll get to the Auto Smackdown in a minute. And that is, I think we got away from the advisor model, right? So these PEPs were supposed to be like subscribe it and be done. I think we're overlooking the value that advisors play in their relationships. Each business is unique. It requires, and I'm not saying this because I am one, each business requires an interpreter to take what is business needs and business issues and turn them into ERISA speak. And without that, you have a disconnect. We see that in standalone plans where there's no advisor and intermediary, right? Done properly, a financial intermediary, a plan advisor can really be a value add to take what is a business need and what is a business issue or a business change and turn it into what needs to happen to the plan, right? And I think we got away from that with this PEP thing a little bit. And a lot of the PEPs that were successful were very insular. So you had to be a member of this particular organization in order to sell into them. And I think that also hurt the distribution, quite a bit. I kind of liken it to, if you think back to when the iPhone first came out, it was only available through AT&T. You had to be an AT&T customer to get to the iPhone. Apple quickly realized that they would never have the absolutely overwhelming success they had with the iPhone unless they rolled it out to other providers, right? And they spread it out to all the different carriers. I think in order for PEPs to be successful, as I mentioned a minute ago, you either have to be a behemoth, so you've got so much built-in asset base that you can siphon just a little bit off and get the thing to grow, or you have to expand access to the PEP, and that's just something that the marketplace doesn't really have a great hold on right now. To add fuel to the fire, and I speak in memes, I apologize if you don't. The DOL went ahead and tried to put the PEP fire out with this audit ruling that they came out with last year. When we first got PEPs, everybody's thought was, because of some of the language in the law, that if you could keep the number of employees under 1,000, you wouldn't have to audit the PEP. And so what you saw were these PEPs that were created in series. So like if you look at what I put in here, about a third of the ones that I pulled randomly had a number in there, right? So it said, Super Ultimate PEP number 1. And that indicates, sometimes they got to number 2, but that indicated that they were going to roll it up to 1,000 and then they were going to stop and start a new version of that PEP to avoid the need for an audit. I can hear Alex rolling his eyes from here. And I think anybody with any of knowledge of the DOL's sort of disapproval of these things would know that was not going to be the case. Although for a long time that was the accepted norm. But the DOL announced that nope, over 100 employees total, or 120 in a single employer, would require an audit of the PEP. And when that happened, new PEP and PPP registrations dropped like a rock overnight. the DOL poured a whole bunch of cold water all over everything that had to do with PEPs. And suddenly, I think that was the moment where everybody was like, this isn't the panacea that we thought it was going to be. And a lot of these advisors and other firms that started these PEPs suddenly realized, we have a puppy and we don't want a puppy. And that's kind of where I think we've arrived at today. If I had to point to a turning point in the PEP world, it would be right here. Okay, so what's the solution to all of this? Number one, we need to do some recognition. We need to get our house in order, and as an industry, we need to kind of come to some accepted norms. And I apologize if you don't agree with me on these. It is my opinion, these aren't factual. Number one, we need to recognize that PEPs are part of the solution, but they are not the solution. PEPs will not work for everyone, and we have to stop acting that way. Two, and by the way, for the most part, I believe the industry has kind of come to these realizations, but I think early on we were drinking some magic Kool-Aid about what these PEPs were going to do. I was one that it took me a long time to get to a point where I was willing to engage in a PEP, which we'll talk about in a minute. Number two, PEPs do not magically suspend the complexities of 401k plans. I've beaten this horse to death. These are still 401k plans. They still need experts. Number three, PEPs are not for all plan sponsors. Some plan sponsors have complicated situations and they want their flexibility. They want their name on the name of the plan. That's what they want, and that's what they should get. We cannot make this a panacea for everybody. Number four, PEPs will not hit critical mass through startup plans alone. I know I've talked to a lot of people who are like, yeah, PEPs are for startups. One of the things you will learn if you try to start a PEP is there are some providers that simply will not take startup plans in PEPs. When we established ours, we had to beg the provider to let us put startup plans in there. Well, tell me something. What good is a PEP if I don't? What good is a PEP to expand the coverage gap or to shrink the coverage gap if I can't put startup plans in there? Kind of an interesting little ism. PEPs need to be run by professionals. Kind of goes part of the second bullet point. These are complex things. We cannot pull them together with chewing gum and duct tape. We need to have them run by people who know what they are doing. In order that, or they will fail and they will create more problems. And I'm guaranteeing you this is what the Department of Labor is concerned about. As I mentioned a second ago, the financial advisor is still a critical component of this. We need to make sure we understand that. Lastly, and kind of part and parcel with that, we need to expand access to PEPs to smaller advisors. And currently there isn't a great way to do that until now. So I would say 6 months ago, kind of Ari alluded that we've been working on a project together. I was an initial sort of skeptic of PEPs. We tried to build one. I could not. And, I should say that we are a large plan advisor. So, we work with plans, several $100 million, several tens of thousands of employees, extremely complicated plan setup. So we are no stranger to complicated 401k and ERISA situations. And I feel like I say this a lot, but then it always changes, or I always prove myself not true. I feel like I've seen everything at this point in time. I feel like I've been there and done that. One of my clients will come up with something creative next week that I haven't seen yet, but we tried to pull them together, and I would run the model and the pricing, and I just couldn't get it to be a compelling story. You could always have the fiduciary story, the offloading piece, but unless the pricing was there, you were not going to get the established plans with $4, $5, $6 million, $10 million to come in unless you get the pricing to something that was, compelling. And so you were looking at startups, and then you were looking at, in 2 years having $7 million cobbled together. That's not going to make a successful PEP. In fact, we're going to see a lot of those PEPs. I think are starting to be, their owners or their caretakers or their PPPs are sort of looking around going, what should we do with this? So about 6 months ago, maybe a little bit more than that now, we had the opportunity with another MEP that was winding down to utilize those assets to establish the Secure Horizons pooled employer plan. And we had a couple of key sort of building blocks that we wanted to put together with this, right? Number one, the assets that we had got us over the hill. So, for us, we had a running head start. And I acknowledge that. It allowed us to secure pricing in a way that we did not need to look backwards and go, oh, this may blow apart on us. We've kind of crossed that Rubicon already. So that's a major advantage. But one of the key things for us was the chassis. And when I say the chassis, I'm talking about the experts. Okay. We wanted to put together something where the underlying providers were bulletproof. And so we partnered up with Pentegra and Empower and Ari. Ari is our trustee and is on our PPP committee, and also, I guess, not really officially counsel, but he's Ari. So we value his opinion. And then Advis, which is our firm, is the 338 investment advisor piece of it, and the sort of the front end servicing piece of it. And that was really important to us because we wanted to make sure that we sort of had the best of the best in there. And when we looked at it, we found that Empower kind of gave us the most flexibility for the different options that we wanted to be able to put out there. Next thing is we wanted flexibility, right? So one of the criticisms of PEPs is that you get this like sort of very limited menu of colors. Like it's the 16 color crayon box, not the 64 color crayon box. And we wanted to be a little bit different in that regard. We wanted to give as full flexibility in the plan design as possible, because that allows you to pull in more plans, right? So the more complicated you can make the plan. And so you needed a partner that was able to handle that from a document perspective and from an administrative perspective. And that's where Pentegra came into it. And then lastly, one of the key tenets for us was we wanted to design a solution that we could offer to smaller advisors. So, if you are an Aon advisor, or if you're an NFP or anything, you probably have your own built-in PEP that you can go to. But if you're an advisor who has a couple of different plans, who occasionally bumps into a 401k plan and either pushes it off somewhere without being able to monetize it, maybe a referral fee or something like that, but don't like the idea where you have to kind of give away that client, and you give away the opportunities that come with servicing that client on an education basis, we wanted to give an opportunity for those advisors to have a place where they can write a PEP and write a plan into the PEP while maintaining that relationship. And so our model is basically, we have the PEP cost. There is built-in compensation for advisors if they are to bring a plan to the PEP of a certain amount. And then the advisor is able to add on to that compensation up to a limit if they feel like they can add more services to that. That advisor typically handles the education, the participant education. One of the big tenets of this whole thing is we want to increase that experience. To the speaker before me, I agree with almost everything you said in terms of engaging with those participants. The advisor that brings that plan in has the opportunity to do that themselves, or we can handle that for them, depending on what their model suggests. But it allows you to maintain access to your client, to maintain your client relationships, but to have a place to put that in a way where the pricing is extremely, extremely competitive. I would put our pricing up against pretty much anybody in the industry, and I think we're going to come very close to even, or maybe even a little bit ahead, definitely above most of the independents that are out there. And the quality doesn't suffer for that. You have a full Empower product, a full Pentegra product, and all the protections that come along with that. So, that's what we have been working on for the last year. We are it is now online, and we are converting those assets over into it. We estimate we'll probably have somewhere between, I'd say about 160 to 200 million by the end of March. And then, we're looking to grow from there. I put my contact information on the screen. I don't know how long I was supposed to talk for. I think we were a little behind, so I'm going to give everybody back that time. Ari, did I miss anything?
Yeah, just Mike has a question. What is the absolute ideal candidate for a PEP, and what is the worst candidate for a PEP?
The absolute ideal candidate for a PEP and the worst. Really interesting question. So the ideal candidate for a PEP, and this is something that we kind of talked about a lot, right? The ideal candidate for a PEP actually is pretty much anybody between, I'm going to say 0 and if a startup, I can't see a model based on the pricing that we have. I can't see a model in which a startup should start their own standalone plan unless they have a pool of assets ready to come into it. Pricing wise, we're going to knock all those out of there. So if you've got startups, those are absolute ideal because we can also get them set up much faster because these things are plug and play. So we've got a system in place where you get a document, boom, you're ready to fly. So that's an ideal situation. On the upper end of that spectrum in the 20s, 30s, 40s, millions, those are going to be plan sponsors that just simply don't want to deal with the plan, right? We have one adopting employer who could clearly have their own 401k plan standalone, but has just sort of said, I don't want to deal with that. I don't want that liability, and I don't want to deal with that audit, right? And so they are a great candidate. Speaking candidly, pricing wise, once we get to 30 million, it's going to be hard to tell a pricing story. We'll look more to the fiduciary aspect of that. In the 1 to 10-ish range, the primary candidate there are the 1 to 10s that have more than 120, or that have, I'll say it this way, that have 118 employees, right? Because they are knocking on the door of needing an audit, and like, boom, overnight, they got that audit cost. They have no idea what's coming from an audit. Alex, I can hear you in my ear. They are about to pick up that audit piece, and they know it's going to be a little bit of work, and they're looking to avoid that. And so they are a really good candidate from that perspective, because usually we can get the pricing to work. We get them a really a good product and all of that. The other thing I think is really the other kind of market that I think is great from a candidate perspective are some of these older platform, like sort of group annuity. I'm not slamming group annuities. Don't send me hate mail, but the group annuity platforms that may be overpriced, they just haven't been looked at in a while, predominantly because they're either smaller employers or there's just not an established committee. Those types of things are great. I think the bread and butter for PEPs is always going to be start up to 10, 15 million. After that, there's going to be folks that come in. I know that Aon and some of the others are looking at bringing some of those big boys in, and they've had some success with it. It's just a totally different sale, I guess I would say. I forgot the second question. Hang on, what was it? The worst candidate for a PEP. It's a harder one. Obviously the big boys, anybody who's up there in terms of assets and huge participant counts, that's not going to be something that's going to be price helpful. The other thing I would say as an automatic disqualifier is if you have a really complicated corporate structure or other benefit structures. So if you've got other types of plans that are out there, or you've got like things that interact with ESOPs and all that stuff, that can get a little wonky because we have to do the joint administration and testing and all of that. Typically at that point in time, it's going to make more sense for you to have an individual plan. But we can always have that goal. I did get a question. What are the separate roles for Pentegra and Empower? Okay, so Empower is the front end piece, the website for the participants, the trading, the all the investments, all the part that the participants touch, and they keep all the record keeping and they keep the assets and all of that sort of stuff. Pentegra's role is to handle all of the ERISA and compliance work in the background. So each plan needs a document. All those documents have to tie to a master plan document. At the end of the year, we have to do compliance testing for each individual plan, and we have to aggregate all of these assets into one 5500 and make sure all of those nuts and bolts are tying. Pentegra does that piece of it. Right now, almost all the major providers are requiring a TPA like Pentegra if you're going to have a PEP in place. So I hope I answered that question. There was a chat as well, which I think I missed. It's Alex telling me that he wants to audit the PEP. I'm kidding, Alex.
I would be interested in that, but that's a whole nother story.
We'll have that conversation at a different time.
Yeah, we're gonna have that. We'll have that conversation. And that's that, I guess. So thank you, Andrew, and there's your contact info, and for Cody and all that. And it's fun and exciting as the PEP space can be, but it could also be a scary situation for a lot of providers who are just going to axe it because they just didn't achieve that critical mass that they needed to make it a go. And finally, next, Greg Reed from Q3. And Greg, take it away.
Thanks very much, Ari. Let me make sure everybody can see my screen.
We got, I see it. Just got to
You
put it,
do?
yeah,
Perfect.
just the slideshow.
All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about the management of target date funds in retirement plans, why they have captured the attention of so many participants, why they work and why they don't, and then talk a little bit about what we can do at Q to maybe help you win your plans. So my compliance department's contribution to the presentation. I think there's only one slide that this would be relevant to. So first I want to start with why target dates have captured the imagination of investors. And I think it's because the vast majority of investors really don't understand how to invest. If we look at this JP Morgan study, which is similar to the Dalbar studies, it shows that the average investor has significantly underperformed the market. It's just the nature of investors and the emotion of investing. If you, I'm preaching to the choir here, but if you look compared to a 60-40 portfolio, most average investors are getting about half the performance of 60-40, and clearly a lot of them should be doing better than that. So I think that's why some have embraced target date funds. If we think back to the evolution of retirement plans, we realize that prior to 401ks kind of being the most common retirement plan, everything was a pension or a DB plan where the plan sponsor would hire a professional money manager to manage to a goal for the plan, and the participants just got the benefit of whatever happened. It was rare that the plan sponsor themselves did the management. They would usually hire somebody with the expertise to get them to their goal. When we know the first 401k opened in the early 80s, what that provided was the opportunity for plan sponsors to say, really, I don't have to be responsible for paying a money manager to manage to get my clients, my employees to their goal. So if you think about it, for a long time, prior to 1980, all retirement plans were professionally managed. Subsequent to that, it wasn't until the early 90s when target dates joined the 401k space that most participants were pretty much on their own. They were handed the keys to their retirement, and most of them don't know what to do with that. And so over the last several decades, there's been an evolution in the retirement plan space, but for the most part, it's settled on target date funds as the solution for participants. But target date funds haven't been ideal. Now, of the 9.9 trillion in assets in DC plans, about 3.5 trillion are in target date funds. So roughly a little over a third of assets are in target date funds, but it looks like that's a growing area where more and more assets are going there. In our experience, it seems about at least half of the participants will choose target dates in the plans that we're familiar with. And the average expense ratio for a target date fund is around 68 basis points. Now, keep in mind that includes all of the group annuity target date funds as well, as opposed to just the closed-end funds. And 82% of assets in the target date space are managed by 5 firms. I'll let you all think to yourselves who those 5 firms are, but I'm going to show you in just a second who the top 5 firms are if you include the group annuity space. It would be Vanguard, Fidelity, T. Rowe, American Funds, and JP Morgan. I know that JP Morgan will maybe be the one that's the most surprising. Vanguard and Fidelity actually have over half of those assets. This slide is meant to kind of show you how they all manage, just how these top money managers are managing target date funds. If you look in the Vanguard, you'll notice the most aggressive of their target dates is the 2070, and it has approximately a 90% allocation to equities. Fidelity is also a 90% allocation. T. Rowe Price is 90%. American Funds is a little more conservative. at 84%. And then JP Morgan is significantly more conservative at 81% for their most aggressive target date. And then you can see what their 2050 and their 2030 allocations look like. Vanguard creates their target dates from 5 Vanguard funds. So if you look at the prospectus for the Vanguard target date funds, you'll notice that they're using 5 of their funds to achieve the various risk tolerances they're looking for. Fidelity, it's 23 Fidelity funds, and it feels like every time they add a new fund, I think they're probably going to seed it with some money from their target date funds. T. Rowe Price is using 18 T. Rowe Price funds, American funds, 20 American funds, and JP Morgan, 23 JP Morgan funds. So in essence, they're just building portfolios from their existing universes. They will, in the case of all these providers, they offset the underlying expenses. So they aren't paying extra for this. They're just using the tools that they have in their toolbox. And you can kind of see a little bit about how they allocate amongst the different asset classes. What's really important to note is that those are passive asset allocations. They are rebalanced annually. There's very rarely position changes. There won't be position changes during the year. And I don't think I'm surprising anybody on this call with that information. A target date fund is really an asset allocation fund. But here's the challenge. The big complaints that people have about target date funds is they don't hold up to changing markets. Target date funds experienced devastating losses during 2008, leaving a lot of investors unprepared for retirement. I'm sure any advisor on here can remember that time where they had clients who may have been thinking about retiring in 08 or 09 or 2010. And 2008 meant they ended up having to extend their employment years by at least a few just to get back to even. Here's what happened in 2022 for the 2060 portfolios from those different providers. This is the max drawdown during that year. So while the S&P was down about 25%, you can see they were all down. The 2060 portfolio, which is not even their most aggressive portfolio, was down comparable to what the S&P. And part of that is we know bonds didn't do very well in that year either. So for those people in the middle of the year, you had investors who were probably looking at their portfolios thinking, I could have done this. I could have lost this. And we all understand the mathematics of losses. The reason, the secret to portfolio management isn't always to give them the biggest gains. It's to help minimize the losses so that the time to recover isn't as long. And that's really a big part of why target date funds may have let people down, because they really don't have the downside protection. One of the other complaints is that they're not responsive to market changes since they've got this fixed glide path. So there's never going to be a time where a client might look at the portfolio and think, oh, look, they've increased our cash position, or they've shifted us out of internationals, or they've adjusted based on some sector of the market that's underperforming. It's just not the way a passive portfolio like a typical target date fund works. And as long as the investor understands that, it's really just a diverse portfolio, they're probably fine. But the vast majority of investors in a target date fund expect that something more is happening under the hood. And so what we're going to talk about is kind of the distinction between what a passive portfolio might look like and what an active solution might look like, one that Q3 offers. But there are other providers out there that have active solutions. So we'll start on the right, the passive solution. It's an annual rebalance primarily. If you look at the asset allocation models that they have for the target date funds, they do an annual rebalance. These examples of allocations are from Morningstar, a typical target date. And you can see that domestic equity in this 2040 model is 56%. And 30% in international equities, and then 12% in domestic bonds, and 2% in international bonds. And it's passive, and it's fine, but it's not doing necessarily what participants think it's doing when they buy it. An active portfolio would be something like what we offer, where portfolio is looked at every week. You adjust the portfolio based on what's happening in the market. You can be dynamic, so you can reduce your exposure to internationals if that makes sense, or you can reduce your exposure to domestic bonds, or you can include some alternatives that wouldn't typically be in a typical target date. You can expose yourself to domestic equities or international equities, and you can pick up cash. So in our case, our 2040 portfolio can get all the way to 50% cash. That would be rare, but the ability for the portfolio to adjust in that way is there. Here's an example of what a glide path for an actively managed portfolio might look like. It looks just like any other target date, but what distinguishes it is it has the ability to increase cash during down periods. So it's not a passive portfolio, while the equity and bond allocations are similar to a typical target date. The fact that they can shift throughout the year can be more responsive. The bullets over to the left kind of explain some of the key differences between a managed portfolio versus a passive target date. In our case, we use a diverse low-cost ETF universe. We screen the universe every year to determine which funds we're going to pick from, and then review the portfolio every week. It's very diverse and includes alternatives that wouldn't ordinarily be included in a target date. We have some tactical components that can allow us to be more responsive. And most importantly, we sign on as a fiduciary to the plan for the participants who use our service, which as a registered investment advisor, that's just the nature of our business, but that's something else that distinguishes it from a typical target date fund. Vanguard isn't going to sign on as a fiduciary for the participants using their fund. Here's a similar look to what you just saw, but in pie chart form. So you can see how the allocations, while they are static in our target weightings, the underlying positions are actively managed. So the sleeve that is the active equity sleeve is reviewed every week, and we're going to change what we're holding in that sleeve. The core equity sleeve is allocated every week. The bond sleeve is allocated, and our alternative sleeve is reviewed every week. That doesn't mean there's going to be a change every week, but at least we're going to review them every Wednesday to determine what's happening in the market and how we should respond. Here's an example of the current universe that we're looking at. So the core equity are the traditional asset classes. You can see there on the far left. They're small cap, mid cap, large cap, growth and value. And we choose among those to see what we think makes the most sense to be holding at a given time. So we don't have to hold small cap if small cap isn't performing. We don't have to hold large cap, or we don't have to have growth or value, depending on what we see is performing. The active equity sleeve is really where we get our upside. You'll note that in addition to some sector funds, we've got internationals in that equity sleeve, and we've got some smart beta funds. Essentially, that's the sleeve where we look for alpha. Our bond portfolio includes, the universe includes all the different bond categories. You'll see government, corporate, short, medium, long-term bonds, some mortgage-backed, high yield, and then we also have a short-term bond sleeve as well, and that's really for our defensive position. But then the most interesting part for a lot of advisors is our alternative sleeve. It includes currencies and precious metals and commodities, but also some more exotic tactical ETFs that give you some upside when the market, essentially non-correlated upside that's really helped us out during the down market of 2022. The performance of the portfolio has been really good, but I'm going to tell you the secret to that is really when the market goes down. Prior to 2022, we were probably middle of the pack compared to other target date funds. And then when 2022 happened, we were able to respond to the market changes that target date funds couldn't. So looking at this slide, you'll take a look to the far right, and it shows how we rank against all the open-ended target date funds in the peer groups. So you'll note that the 2060 is ranked number 1 for the 3 and the 5 year, compared to 192 2060 funds that have been around for 3 years, and 175 that have been around for at least 5 years. The 2050, also number 1 for both those time periods, compared to all the different open-ended target date funds in the peer group, according to Morningstar. Same thing for the 2040, and except the 5 year, we were 4th out of 187. And then 2030, our 3 year, we're still number 1, but 5 years, we're in the top half. I'm not quite sure. I'd have to talk to our research department about why we were just in the top half and not the top 10% or top 5%. But the point is, the management has really done well, and a big part of it was minimizing the losses and the downside, so keeping the participants invested in the game when a lot of them might bail out of the target date and miss the turnaround when the market recovers. One advisor, when we've done this presentation before, said, well, you must be taking a lot more risk in order to be getting better returns. And so I put this together today just for this call. This shows our Q3 Voyage 2060 against several of the biggest brand names in the target date space. Obviously, you recognize a lot of those names, and you'll see that while our return is better, our risk is also lower. The standard deviation is lower, so our Sharpe ratio is significantly higher. The whole point here isn't to say that we're going to be perfect all the time. It's just the idea that if you can have somebody be more responsive, you might be able to address some of the concerns that plan sponsors have about making sure their clients are taken care of. I'm going to share an anecdote. We have a wholesaler who was doing an enrollment meeting with an advisor, and they were asking, the advisor said, well, how do you present this? And he had a very dry PowerPoint presentation, probably dry like the one I'm showing you right now. The advisor says, well, how responsive are people to that? And he explained that we usually get around half of the participants will choose our service. Well, this particular day, they were at an auto company, a company that made auto parts, and they were in the break room, and there were only 2 outlets in the break room, and they had vending machines plugged into them. And our wholesaler had a laptop that was a little suspect if it wasn't plugged in. So he realized he needed to unplug the vending machines, because they aren't going to need those during this meeting. And he plugged in his laptop and his projector. He got everything set. The advisor got up at the beginning of the meeting, and he explained everything they needed to know about enrolling in the plan. And then he introduced our wholesaler to just explain that this plan offered a managed account. And he said he got through about 2 very boring slides, and the screen went black. And he's looking around, and in his head, he's imagining that the HR person is in the back of the room tapping on her watch. And he sees that someone has unplugged his projector and his laptop, and they've replugged in the vending machines, because clearly that's what they needed during this meeting. And our wholesaler said he could feel the sweat dripping under his suit, because he knew he wasn't going to have time to plug everything back in and get everything back up and running. And he said at that moment, he had a moment of inspiration. It was just one of those things that I'm sure it's happened to all of us when you're in a sales situation and you just get this idea that you think is going to resonate with the client. And he just looked around the room and he said, do we have any, he said, I'm not going to get back into this presentation. I'm just going to ask a few questions. Do we have any NASCAR fans here in the room? And thankfully, this auto company had NASCAR fans. And he said, okay, tell me who your favorite driver is. And they called out drivers' names. And I'm not a NASCAR fan, so I couldn't do this like he could. And he latched on to a driver and said, oh, yeah, Dale Earnhardt Jr. Dale Earnhardt Jr. finds his way into the winner's circle a lot, or any name your favorite driver. And It's because they are professionals and they've learned how to drive. The owner, you might surprise you to know, the owner of most NASCARs doesn't drive the car. They hire a professional to do it for them. So let's see how this applies to what you have here. Your employer has provided you with a high performance investment vehicle, and you can drive it yourself. This 401k has access to some of the most quality investments in the industry, and you can go in and make changes and do it yourself. Or you can decide you'd rather have a professional do it for you. And he said, that's where we come in. If you want to have a professional, you can hire a money manager to do it for you. At the end of the meeting, he had 100% participation. He called me up and he said, Greg, this was the best presentation I've ever given. It was great. Everybody liked it. The advisor liked it. The plan sponsor liked it. I'm never going back to using that boring slideshow. And so I was really excited because I thought that's great. An analogy is a much better way to sell than the way we've been selling. So about a week later, I happened to be at an enrollment meeting in Appleton, Wisconsin. And I don't know if you know Appleton, Wisconsin, but I'm going to tell you, it doesn't seem they have a lot of NASCAR fans there, because I said, do we have any NASCAR fans in the room? And I had crickets. They just stared back at me. And I just went through the analogy, even though there weren't any fans, and I could see it was falling on deaf ears. And the advisor said to me, because we had another meeting in the afternoon, and she said, I don't think you should do that analogy this afternoon. You should go to your regular boring presentation. And in the afternoon, I got all set to do that, and everyone had walked in, and I noticed something they all had in common. And if you've been to Appleton, Wisconsin, you won't be surprised. There are a lot of Green Bay Packer fans in the room. And so those Green Bay Packer fans are decked out. In that moment, I had a moment of inspiration that I could take my NASCAR analogy and I could turn it into a football analogy. And so I shifted gears. And at the time, my home team, the Detroit Lions, were not any good. And I joked that I hoped one day we would have a professional football team. This year, it looks like we might have that. But at the time, I mentioned that they had Aaron Rodgers was the quarterback. And I did the whole same analogy, but instead I said, could you do the quarterbacking as well as Aaron Rodgers? Because they hire a professional to be the quarterback, or you can do it yourself and we'll be your quarterback. And that went over great. Everyone loved it. A week or so later, I was down in Alabama, and I told the advisor, I have two analogies. I have a football analogy and I have a NASCAR analogy. Which one should I do? And he said, ask the participants. And so I did the same thing. And I said, I have two analogies. Which would you rather hear, football or NASCAR? And this guy called out and said, do you know what the biggest sporting event in Alabama is? And I said, the Alabama-Auburn football game. And he said, Talladega 500. And so I did the analogy of why you should have a managed account. If having a professional driver, they loved it. It went over great. So for those of you who are looking for a way to introduce managed accounts, you can certainly have somebody from our office work with you, or you can introduce the idea of having a professional quarterback or a professional NASCAR driver. I'm going to wrap up here really quickly and answer any questions anyone might have. Risk does matter to participants in a plan. Matter of fact, a survey by 401k Specialist Magazine found that 7 in 10 participants would rather invest conservatively if it means avoiding the greater risk. And I think that's one of the challenges we all face, is we realize how important it is for them to invest more aggressively than maybe they're comfortable with, particularly if they've got a long time to retirement, because we want them to get to their goals so they can retire. To summarize the difference between the active solution versus a passive target date fund, obviously we're active. We use low-cost ETFs as the underlying investment. They'll use proprietary funds. We review the portfolio every week. They do an annual rebalance. We take on a fiduciary role. They do not. Our management is flexible. We can adapt. We can adjust to different market environments. Theirs is limited by prospectus, meaning the fund manager could be driving home and have every belief in the world that the market is going to go into the toilet, and he's not going to change the portfolio allocation because that's what the prospectus tells them to do. Whereas in our case, if all of our indicators show that the market's going to be poor, we're going to make changes. And with that, I'm open for questions, and I hope I've given back some time to people who like that.
I did not see any questions.
Well, that must mean I told everybody everything they needed to hear, Ari. I will
Well,
say
you know,
that-
I was a big NASCAR fan when my son was a NASCAR fan, and now, you know, I remember going to Poconos, driving 2 hours, getting into a driver's meeting Danica Patrick and Tony Stewart and all that, and you can't get him to even. I don't think he even knows who won the last championship, but whatever.
Well, for those who are looking for our target date fund or target date solution, they're currently available at Mid-Atlantic or Matrix Trust, which work with a variety of record keepers. But more importantly, we're going to be rolling out some CITs toward the end of the year. So if people want to know more about those, or probably later this year, actually.
And
So
there was one question about whether you could make the slide deck available.
I sure can. I'll tell you what. You can reach out to Ari or myself or Jeff Todd, our wholesaler, and we will send you the slide deck.
Okay, perfect.
Well, thanks, Ari. Thanks for including us.
No problem. Thank you. And next is, where is he? Joe Caruso. You know, I know Joe from way back when we used to work together at some place where I don't even want to say the name because I'll get myself in trouble. But Joe is the preeminent insurance expert when it comes to ERISA bonds, fiduciary liability, and all that other stuff. And that's who I refer business to. And, you know, there was that one time I got him, the one policy that had to pay out, that was me. But you know, it is what it is. But Joe, take it away and tell me when to move the slide.
Okay. Well, my name is Joe Caruso. Ari, thank you. Thank you to the other presenters. I think this has been unbelievable. A little bit about me. I've been in this space going on 40 years now. Can you believe that? And I've known Ari for probably close to 25, 30 now. So I work with financial institutions, and I only work within the financial institution space. So hedge funds, money managers, broker-dealers, registered investment advisors. On the retirement side, TPAs, record keepers, 316, 38, 338s, the whole gamut, and understanding the risk exposures that exist within the retirement space, whether it be a solo K, a MEP, a PEP, things of that nature. So we represent all of those entities out there. So we can turn to the next slide, Ari. And there's me, as I said. The components of myself, I'm a risk manager at heart. Let's mitigate the risk and understand your risk individually, because I think a lot of times people don't understand risk. Where does the risk lie? Does it lie with the TPA? Does it lie with the record keeper? Does it lie with the advisor? Does it lie with the plan sponsor? Something that Ed echoed early on. The plan sponsor is the ultimate fiduciary. Yes, you can mitigate certain risks and certain fiduciary liability based upon the retirement product you are. But once again, the DOL will say, you are the ultimate fiduciary. You made the decisions, you hired, you fired, you brought yourself into this mix. So there are certain products and certain risks you have to understand within that, okay? And we'll go through the cyber, E&O bonds, the management liability policies in there as well. All the stuff I know that everybody loves to go through and probably falls asleep when they start reading their policies. But I will stress to you, if you are an RIA, if you are a TPA, if you are a third-party administrator, okay, a 338, a 321, a 316, you have to understand your policy, because a policy is there, the endorsements, to protect you, but they're also there to protect the insurance company. And you're going to go, what? Then yes, the insurance company doesn't want to pay a claim. They don't want to pay a claim. We see that every single day. So we make sure that understanding your risk and understanding the policy, because we have to overlay the risk with the policy. And as we've all seen right now, the insurance market is upside down. Homeowners insurance down in the Southeast and out on the West, unbelievable. Well, that has transpired into what we're seeing now in the financial institutional world. So, Ari, we can turn over to the next slide. As we've seen, really, there's been some watershed moments within the industry. Schwab and Fidelity, probably a little more than 24 months ago, 2 years ago, really were the first. Schwab mandating all of their RIAs to have E&O, crime, and more importantly, cyber. Fidelity then followed suit. But more importantly, out there, I should say, what was out there existing is the state of Oregon and the state of Oklahoma had said, listen, we've already mandated this. So if you're a broker dealer or a registered investment advisor and you reside in the state of Oregon and the state of Oklahoma, you have to have $1 million worth of coverage, not just the requirement that Schwab or Fidelity has, which is a total of $1 million existing within all three of those policies. So we're going to talk today, as I said, about RIA, E&O, cyber, crime coverage, and understanding that every policy is not the same. We have single limit policies and we have pooled policy. Well, a single limit policy, where the policy covers you to $1 million or $2 million, whatever that is, versus a pooled policy. A pooled policy will have one big pool, maybe 10 million, 15 million, and it sells that policy or it sells that representation of that pool 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 times. And we see those policies existing within some of the large trade associations where the price is unbelievably competitive. But remember this, that you have a pool of 10 million, 15 million, and that policy has been sold 1,000 times, 2,000 times, 3,000 times to all of that association constituents out there. Well, guess what? If there's been some claims, that pool gets to shrink more and more. So you have a claim or you have a duty to defend yourself and that pool has run dry, but you sit there and say, well, I have a coverage. No, no, no. You have a piece of paper. You have no liability. You have no insurance. So those are the things that, once again, when you look at a single limit policy versus a pooled limit policy, are not necessarily explained and explained well to advisors, TPAs, record keepers as well. So realizing that you're buying coverage, but you're not really sometimes having coverage because those pooled plans that are associated with those associations are being sold 1,000 times over. And that to me is the most alarming thing. You can go on the web and buy insurance and bind it up immediately with a credit card. But what you're getting is a very, very, very thin policy. Remember, we talked about the understanding of liability and understanding what the coverages that you have and what loopholes or the insurance company is going to use to get out of paying those claims. So we sit down with every single client that we have and understand and help you understand where the risk is, where the exposure is, and how to mitigate that risk. As I said, I am a risk manager at heart. I want to advocate for you to the carriers and help you understand where that is there, okay? So all E&O policies are not the same, just like all homeowners policies are not the same, just like all car insurance is not the same. Every insurance policy is not the same. E&O for an RIA is not the same, whether it be Markel or Travelers or Hartford or CNA. They're all different and they have all different features within there. And I can tell you some of those features are there to help advocate for you. A lot of times clients say, well, I pay and I pay and I pay and I don't get anything for it. Well, not necessarily. You could pay and have audit exposures or audit or pre-active, I should say, risk mitigations that are help come in and do a mock audit that they'll pick up a portion of that for you. So you're getting value without necessarily having a claim, knock on wood for that. So when you understand all policies and all carriers are not the same. Every policy is different. Every aspect of a policy is different. And that goes to show you from a standpoint of the differences between what you're doing for that client. Are you acting as a 338? Are you acting as a TPA? Are you just the investment advisor? Are you doing multiple? Are you acting as a 338 and then doing financial planning? Well, it's a lot of times the financial planning is not encompassed in your E&O policy. So there's grave differences in coverages and coverage limits, okay? So what type of investments are covered? Are they 40 Act funds out there? So we'll see policies, especially the click and bind policies, not cover real estate investments, not covered, okay? Any alts, cyber, cryptocurrencies, they won't be covered. So you're thinking, hey, I've got an E&O policy, but that investment vehicle that you're putting people in is not covered, and it is carved out. So the next slide, please, Ari. As we said, Schwab and Fidelity and Pershing are now requiring cyber coverage. And cyber coverage is probably the reason why Schwab, Fidelity, and Pershing have all mandated this, because recognizing that we're not going on all the websites that we should be staying off of. So if we're using a website that has cookies attached to it, or some information that we're downloading, and all of a sudden now our machines are being corrupted, and now we're going onto the advisor platform for Schwab, Fidelity, or Pershing. Once again, now we've got an issue in there as well. So hence the reason why they mandated this coverage is because they were paying out claims for the advisor, because they are the ultimate custodians in there, okay? The main component I would always say about cyber is the social engineering endorsements. That is critical. Once again, Schwab, Fidelity, and Pershing are all going to mandate social engineering. So when you look at your cyber policies, critical in there is the social engineering. And I can tell you this, the carriers will limit you 50,000, 100,000, 200,000. And most of I should say, the max you'll see coverage is 250,000 on a standard policy. We're able to work with some of our carriers to move that social engineering piece up. And it is the most critical. If you're going to have an issue with your cyber policy, this is the component that is the most touched upon area within a cyber policy. So you've got hacks, you've got data breaches, you've got ransomwares, okay? All policies, once again, are not the same. These are clearly differences in everything. So when we look at the cyber policies, we recognize the various components. And once again, you're going to look at your policies and procedures. The carriers are going to want to see that you have a cyber policy and that you're doing all of the necessary adherence to it. Are you changing the passwords as required? If you're not, that's going to be a problem. So we've got people that will help you if you don't have a cyber policy or a cyber corporate policy. In fact, we think we can get Ari involved in some of that as well. So some of that components in there as well. So on to the next, please. Let's talk about crime insurance, crime, theft. Okay, we've seen issues within the crime component. As I always say, when people are backed up against the wall, whether it be an advisor, where they steal and how they steal, this is theft at its best. Okay, and we saw a TPA record keeper down in Texas some years ago really run rampant through the retirement space and stealing, dipping into clients' monies and stealing. So crime coverage is the most okay. So we see a requirement from Schwab, Fidelity, and Pershing as well. The policy comes. It really comes first if you have a crime, if you have cyber. So crime is a component or does cover certain components of cyber in there as well. So once again, we look at the policies and understanding where the risk is, help you understand that risk, Because not all, once again, not all policies, geez, I didn't realize I put that in every slide. Not all policies are the same. When we look at our TPAs and our record keepers, having crime policies and working with outside advisors versus being a producing TPA or record keeper, you'll have first party coverage would be anybody inside of that. Okay. And if they're working with outside, if there may not be if there may not be a producing firm, they may work with outside advisors. We would extend to them and let them realize that they need third party coverage. And I think that's the most important thing, is recognizing where the risk is and how to address it. I think when you look at crime coverage and you look at components out there of the industry, you look at Madoff, you look at certain things, crime really is that area. So we look at also ERISA bonds. Once again, one of the key components of a 401k is you do need a 401k ERISA bond in there as well. So on to the next, please. Coverages for the retirement plans and fiduciary should purchase and how they differ. Well, we just mentioned the ERISA bond. One of the only requirements of insurance within the 401k business is an ERISA bond, obviously, and that is to make sure that the plan sponsor is not absconding or commingling any of the participants' funds as well. Fiduciary liability. I think a lot of people probably overstate, as one of our other presentations said, most advisors, most TPAs, most record keepers clearly delineate what responsibilities they have as a fiduciary, as a co-fiduciary. But when you're getting a young or aggressive individual that may overstate and say to the plan sponsor, I become your fiduciary. Well, as we all know, that's not true. So I stress to people, you have to understand, as from the plan sponsor, you are the ultimate fiduciary. I had a client just recently down in the Southeast here. We picked them up as a client, and I asked them, I said, do you have a fiduciary policy? And they said, yes, we do. It's part of our E&O. And I said, whoa. Same word, different coverage. And they said, what? Yep. They had as a TPA, they had no fiduciary coverage. And I said, guys, we have a big problem here. You clearly, who represented you with this policy, did not tell you that fiduciary inside an E&O is not the same as professional fiduciary in the 401k. So big issue. We were able to rectify it, get them back on track, and understand that sometimes words in different policies are not the same, although they may be the same word. They do not cover. So clearly, fiduciary on the D&O side, the directors and officers side, does not extend to actively managing a 401k or your fiduciary liability from a plan sponsor in there as well. Different type of fiduciary liability. So, and it would cover them as the fiduciary of their own plan, not of somebody else's plan as a management liability. So in there as well. So clearly some differentiation in coverage, not necessarily the same. So crime bonds. So clearly we've seen one of the presentations that talked about the Mets and Mr. Madoff. Clearly one of the things you need to stress to when you're working with outside advisors, giving them delineation or giving them full discretion, you need to have the bond for them clearly and extend to them, because not everybody is truthful every single day. And that's really the necessary evil. Once again, you're working with, you as the fiduciary have to work in the best interest of your participants or your employees. And once again, so I commend the Mets for doing that. There aren't many employers that would have recognized that there is that liability out there and acted upon a crime bond. So little something different. So once again, we would recommend with some crime components that we add additional insureds on our TPA and our record keeper to the plan sponsor and vice versa. So there's a cross coverage of those, and it helps out immensely. Directors and officers liability, really that's for the entities themselves. So an RIA, you want to have directors and officers liability, because if you do have a claim that is named not only the individual, but the entity itself, now you've got coverage for the entity. You have a duty to defend not only the plan, the advisor, but the firm has coverage as well. So we talked about cyber coverage. Cyber coverage has changed immensely over the last couple of years. What used to be extremely expensive has now gotten much more price conscious. So if you're a small firm, RIA, one of the things I would stress more importantly is that you do buy full-blown cyber policy. Don't just peel away a small portion of $100,000, $200,000. A full-blown $1 million or $2 million policy clearly will go a long way when the claims start racking up, because attorneys like Ari are not cheap. They do come at a few $100 an hour. I think when you look at Sam Bankman-Fried, what the attorneys were getting down there was $2,000 an hour, something disgusting. I can't believe that the coverage was picking up $2,000. So, you know, for his defense, the DNO did step in and give an allocation, but yeah, pretty unbelievable rate of $2,000. Cyber coverage today is it's not the same, and I say not the same in the sense that when we look at bad actors, they're not walking through the front door, right? My analogy is a house. Not everybody who comes to rob the house goes through the front door. They go through the back window, they go through second story window, they go in through the garage. Our naive or being naive puts us in jeopardy for cyber. We go on, and I say go on websites, but we download things, we get an email. We've all learned, we've all seen the you know, you're clicking on something that you shouldn't click on, and we do it, you know, or somebody embeds something, a file in us accidentally. It's what happens. It's, you know, it's the bad actors are getting worse, and the bad actors are preying on our vulnerabilities to the point where it's gotten unbelievable. I think we saw a cyber breach to a GoFundMe page. And it was unbelievable. So you'd click on the GoFundMe page, and all of a sudden now, you know, they got your computer, you're done. So we need to be very, very cautious. So, but most importantly, these policies are different in their own respects, and they act different, and they cover different aspects of a retirement plan and plan fiduciary, you know, who is acting as the plan fiduciary. One of the things I stress is if you're a 316 or 338, 321, is advocating to the plan sponsor. And I say advocating, meaning I think you look at a highway and you explain to them, you are, Mr. Plan Sponsor, you are the road. My lane is this lane as a 338. My lane is this one. The middle lane as a 316, and my lane is over here to the left, to the right-hand side is the 321. So one can affect the other. So one issue can affect what happens to some of the other service providers that are servicing the plan. But once again, the plan sponsor needs some coverage and needs somebody to advocate for them for that coverage. And we don't see a lot of that. So next slide. I think that's it. And as I was just saying, one of my pet peeves is nobody is advocating for for the plan to go out and buy fiduciary insurance. Yes, there are a couple of portals where you can buy, once again, a click and bind. But once again, that's what you're going to get. You're going to get a thinly covered plan in there. So plan level fiduciary coverage is a pet peeve of mine. I don't think plan sponsors understand their risk. We as within the retirement space talk fiduciary liability, we talk roles and responsibilities, we talk within the best interest of the plan, the best interest of the participant. But ultimately, if there's a deficiency or if there is a problem, that plan sponsor is going to get named in a suit. How many plan sponsors can afford a duty to defend claim to spend $15,000, $20,000, $50,000 just defending their actions on what happened on a 338 or 316 or somebody of that nature maybe missed something or didn't do something right. So realizing that we need to advocate not only for ourselves, but we need to advocate for the plan participant. We all have our knowledge, we all have our specialty, we all talk in our retirement language, but understanding who is ultimately responsible. That's what we're here to do. We're here to mitigate their risk and to help them and their plan participants. I think what matters most is making sure that we do the job and advocate not only for the plan sponsor, but for the plan participant as well. And I think sometimes we get lost. Some people may get lost in there as well. So whether it's a single plan, a MEP or a PEP, obviously we have our own skill sets and we have our own knowledge sets, but explaining to the plan sponsor ultimately that you are king fiduciary probably doesn't go in depth in understanding that risk. I can tell you in my almost 38 years, so close coming on 40 years, there isn't a situation that we have not come across that we haven't not been able to better mitigate the risk and expose people to what risk lies within their plan or within their own RIA. I think when you look at RIAs and understand that if you're acting as a 338, well, that 338 language needs to be in your ADVs, and you'd be surprised how many RIAs don't have disclosing information within their ADVs that they act as a 338. Well, if that's not happening, I can tell you that their E&O policy probably does not cover them as acting as a 338 or acting as a plan fiduciary. So I can tell you there are a litany of examples I can tell you. I had a client we came across out in the Midwest that had a broker-dealer, had an RIA, and had a TPA. Well, yes, they were getting paid they were selling an A share. They were clearing it through their broker-dealer, getting paid as an RIA and getting paid as a TPA. And as we all know, that's a no-no in many ways. So we were able to help them with the right attorney, shut down the broker-dealer, and do a mea culpa, and get the regulators on board. So I can tell you there hasn't anything that we haven't seen across the board. With the PEPs, I can tell you, yes, there's a ton of PEPs out there. There's a lot of PEPs that I've seen not have the proper coverage. They might have E&O. They don't have coverage for acting as the 402AC. Language has been, I've seen it. I've seen a policy where it excludes ERISA. And I'm like, guys, you are the PEP, you are the 4, and right here. And they would say, I didn't realize that. So like I said, we've got a team of attorneys that are here ready to help on the compliance side. We've got a team of compliance and risk mitigations here. So we're here to help. We're here to open dialogue with you. You have my information, and any questions, any concerns? I know insurance is not everybody's favorite thing, but I will say this, when you look at other industries, okay, everybody, you've got to disclose that you do have coverage. I didn't say you have to disclose, and you're going to sit there and go, oh my God, he said, I need to disclose that. Why wouldn't you? It's a differentiator. I don't see any investment advisor. I don't see anybody talking about that I'm insured. We hire a plumber, we hire a tree guy, and one of the things they advertise is they're insured. So I'll leave you with that. Any questions?
I don't think there's any questions.
All right. Anybody awake?
Well, I'm awake.
Okay.
Joe, always great. I'll see you in Texas and in the Bronx.
Absolutely. My hometown. So great sweater, Ari. I love it.
It's the Vancouver Canucks from the early 80s. I was watching it, for the longest time. I wanted that jersey. Mitchell Ness came back with the NHL jerseys. I'm like, I have to have this one. It's the ugliest jersey I have, even worse than anything I have with the Padres. So up next, certainly not least, Kevin Spaeth from Penchecks. Take it away. It's such a great topic because the changes in the law make that whole rollover IRA such a big deal, but it's been a big deal for the last 20 some odd years. I just remember the old days when we couldn't find a participant and we were told to do 100% withholding. So those were the dark old days when it came to participants and terminated plans and all that kind of stuff. So before Kevin takes over, this will be on YouTube probably tonight. For those, people come in and out with conferences, they sign in, they sign out, and all that stuff. So we'll try to put it up on tonight. Search for it. That 401k conference, whatnot. We should have it up tonight. So Kevin, take it away.
Thank you very much. My name is Kevin Spaeth with Penchecks. I'm a lifelong Yankee fan that grew up on the Jersey Shore, but now I live in Vancouver, but not that Vancouver, Washington. I always call that the second nicest Vancouver in the Pacific Northwest. And what I wanted to talk today, first off, can everybody see my screen? Can everybody see my slides? Can anybody not see my slides?
We can see it.
Okay, great.
You're good.
Well, what I wanted to talk about today is less is more, and the power of cashing out small balances. And all right, so cashing out small balances, for terminated participants, you can with a account balance as of this month, it's under $7,000 vested. Prior to that, it was under $5,000, and Secure 2.0 actually did the 40% increase, which was the first increase since it became law in 2001. So now, and the law says that you can force out in cash balances under 1,000, and you have to roll over to an IRA balances between 1,000 and 7,000. Now, the investments in the IRA, and this has been asked of me, are set for capital preservation rather than long-term gains, because these aren't supposed to be the long-term investment for the participants. It's supposed to be the what they're kept in between them leaving the plan and being reunited with their money. And you have to notify the participants at least 30 days in advance so they can make it a positive election if they want to roll the money out or take it as cash. So again, this became laws with ATRA in 2021, and it was $5,000. They didn't increase that at all in the last 22 years. And when I was in 2001, I moved out to California to work for American Funds, and my rent living in a bungalow on PCH in Laguna Beach was $800 a month. Now I'm in Vancouver, Washington, in a house, and I just found out my mortgage. I found this out during the first presentation. My mortgage payment went up by $108, so now it's a little over $3,000 due to increase in taxes. Now, also last year, and this is really interesting, and this goes back to Pension Assurance's conversation about the DOL audit. The DOL changed the audit requirements last year from looking at eligible employees to account balances. And one of the reasons why they did that was so that with long-term part-time coming on board, there's going to be a lot of plans that will have a lot of eligible non-participating employees that traditionally haven't had to take an audit. And as Alex said, audits can be painful. So with the DOL audit requirement, now it's really in the plan sponsor's best interest to try to force these, get these balances out of the plan as soon as possible. And they can do that with the cash out provision. So we talked about this. So, audits can be up to $10,000. It can be a lot of work. They can be very painful. The least painful if you're working with a professional like Alex and the people over at Pension Assurance, but still it can be a lot. And also the audit is included with a 5500 filing and becomes available on the DOL's website. And traditionally, the audit requirement was any plan with over 100 eligible employees and account balances, including terminated people with account balances, had to have the audit. Last March, the DOL changed the requirement, so now they only look at account balances. And this is a slide I just went over. So by helping your plan sponsors or your prospective plan sponsors get under this 100 life threshold, you could save them over $10,000 plus the extra time and hassle. I see we have a couple of TPAs on the call here, and you can probably think about how much more work you have to do as the third-party administrator to help your plan sponsors with the audit. And to be honest, since you're doing the work, you're probably charging a reasonable fee for that, and that's something that could be saved if they can get that account balance threshold under 100 lives. And they can do that by engaging pen checks to get to under $7,000 and working with their financial advisors to try to roll those 7,000 and up terminated participants over. Another thing about this is, besides saving the $10,000, you're kind of prospect proofing your plans, because a lot of the record keepers out there, I came from Empower last year. They used Larkspur Executive. They have these data mining software that allows advisors to go in and hunt for prospects, but based on the 5500s, which is a publicly filed piece of information. It's on the EFAS website. And if you have an audit, you're using the long form 5500. It includes pretty much every piece of information, and that's putting that into your enemy's lap in order for them to then go out and prospect your plans. If you can eliminate the audit, not only are you saving your client money, but you're also probably going to save your plan from getting phone calls from other advisors. Now, pricing. Bigger isn't always better. So I've been in the business for 26 years, and I was a TPA for 7 years. But besides that, I worked in record keeping, all that. And the pricing for record keeping a lot of times is based on average account balances, not, total assets, not total participants, but the average account balance. And a lot of there are common breakpoints of 5,000, 30,000, 50,000, 100,000. All of it depends on the provider. So if you can get these small balances out for these terminated participants, you can look at getting better pricing for your clients. And these are for the people that really matter, the people that are actually active in the plan, the business owner, the engaged employees, everything like that. And you could even say, and this might be a reach, but you could say that if your terminated participants are dragging down the cost of the plan, then technically you're not paying a reasonable fee and you're in violation of ERISA. So by doing that, you can get the average by getting these $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 account balances that will never grow for participants that are disengaged out. You can look at going back to your record keeper and getting better pricing. You can also do this in the prospecting stage and saying like, hey, the plan right now has 15 employees, average account balance of $20,000. We're going to get five of these employees out. That'll jump it up to 30. What's the pricing look like then? And so record keeping's costs are built into, it's like a base fee and then a per participant fee. The base fee, really, you don't see it, but it's there, and it covers everything from cybersecurity to call center to all that stuff. And then the per participant fee, we called it a per unit fee when I was at Empower. That's on what it costs for each participant. And one of the big things is the required mailings. you've got a lot of these mailings that need to go out on an annual basis, and a lot of people haven't opted for electronic mailings or can opt for electronic mailings. And these have to go out to all people with an account balance, including the terminated employees. Now, so I actually looked this up because I'm a bit of a nerd, and the 8th most valuable liquid on the face of the earth between mercury and GHB is actually printer ink. So, and also as of 3 days ago, the post office increased the price of stamps again by about 4.5%. So sending out these mailings, especially to these small account balances, is a big expense, both either for you, your plan sponsor, or for the record keeper. But at the end of the day, somebody's going to be paying for it. And how do you recoup the cost of this for somebody that's got an average account that's got an account balance of $500 or $1,000? That's really difficult. That's why it's really good to keep on top of this. Now, here's another thing, unvested contributions. When you force these participants out, and remember, we're looking at the account balance, a vested account balance under $7,000. A lot of times they'll have unvested employer contributions to there. And by forcing these out, what you can do, most plans that aren't safe harbor, or even if they are safe harbor, if they're doing additional employer contributions, they'll have a 6-year graded vesting schedule attached to them. So by cleaning up the plan and forcing this out, you can move a lot of this money from these terminated participants' accounts into the forfeiture account. And then depending on the plan document, that can either be used to pay plan expenses, including TPA fees or audit fees, used to reduce future employer contributions, or be reallocated to the participants. And that depends on how the plan document's written. Now, fiduciary liability. Here's another one. The plan sponsor keeps fiduciary liability for these participants, even though they no longer work there, even though they're not going to contribute anymore, even though they're non-responsive. So by helping clean up these participants, you'll help limit the fiduciary liability of your client. Right now, I'm sitting in my hotel room in Sacramento. Last night, I was at the Western Pension Benefit Conference, and one of the things they talked about with these small balances is it's not just fiduciary liability, it's cybersecurity liability. And that's going to be a big thing. The more people on the system, the better chance you have of hacking in. And these employees aren't the engaged ones that are always looking at their account balance. These are the disengaged people that really haven't done anything. So not only can you reduce the fiduciary liability for the plan, but you can also reduce the cybersecurity liability. And I just found this out last night, so I thought it was really interesting. One other thing before I talk about uncashed checks is I wanted to talk about something I found out last week when I was at the National Institute of Pension Administrators Business Management Conference in Scottsdale. If your plan document is written with a cash out provision in there, it's not a discretionary provision. It's something that needs to get done. Cash outs need to happen on at least an annual basis. And that's something that auditors, and Alex, you might be able to back me up on this. That's something that auditors are really going through, like, hey, are you keeping on top of your plan provisions, which say that you will cash out anybody with account balance under $7,000?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's coming. Thanks a lot. That's coming into form a lot more as we go forward. But another thing is uncashed checks. So with the force out rules, it says that you have the ability to cash out anybody under $1,000, and anybody with an account balance between $1,000 and $7,000 has to be rolled over into an IRA. At PenChecks, what we can do is we'll set the rollover amount down to 0, so you can roll over all the money to us. And one of the things this does is it eliminates the problems of uncashed checks. Because remember, we're talking about non-responsive participants that haven't made an election, even though you've told them to. So the chances are when they get these checks, or when we mail out the checks, or the record keeper mails out the checks, they're not going to be cashed. But by rolling it over into an IRA, you separate it from plan assets. It's no longer a plan liability, because an uncashed check is still a plan liability. And you roll it into an IRA. So then it's done. It's done with your plan. They don't have to worry about it. They can clean their hands up. They don't have to send out notices. They don't have to worry about a terminated participant updating their address and people getting lost. Everything's done. And so about 4 months ago, I got married. And one day I was talking about uncashed checks, and I looked down at my desk and I realized that in my inbox, I had about $5,000 worth of uncashed checks. Some of it was wedding presents that I needed to have my my bride sign on for it, and one of them was an IRS refund that I had to have my ex-spouse sign, and it was just things that I had to get done that I didn't get done, and I'm like, shoot, this uncashed check problem is a big deal. This is what I do for a living, and I've got $5,000 worth of uncashed checks sitting on my desk here. So by lowering the rollover balance down to zero or $100 to eliminate fees, that you can eliminate the hassle of the uncashed checks. Now, automatic enrollment. As of this month, any new plan set up is going to be is going to have auto enrollment mandated for any startup plans. And it's going to increase participation by about 50%. You know, the average participation rate in a non-auto enrollment plan is about 60%, and it's a little over 90% for an auto enrollment plan. But these are unengaged participants, so it's going to lead to more and more people that are going to be that aren't paying attention at all and might not even know that, and then are thus going to leave because we are still in the great resignation with the job hopping, or maybe they're calling it quiet quitting right now. I forget what it is. So this is going to lead to an even bigger opportunity in the future. And then, of course, you've got, you know, the long-term part-time. And going back to auto enrollment, long-term part-time employees are eligible to are included with the auto enrollment features. You don't have to give them an employer contribution, but you do have to auto enroll them. And these are people that aren't going to be engaged, that eventually could change jobs and probably aren't making a lot of money, so that the 6% they're deferring won't get above that $7,000. And they'll need to, and then when they do leave, they'll need to take their money with them or have their money be moved out of the plan with them. Now, here at PenChecks, we've become kind of we've been in business. We're a trust company based in San Diego. We've been in business for 30 years now. We've kind of switched to we're now trying to be the fintech service provider for that helps with this. And we've created an online solution called MyAmplify that allows you to manage this process completely online. And we use that, and we've created a product that we call an enhanced IRA. Because a lot of times what I've been talking with is that TPAs will go to their plan sponsors or small business owners and say, hey, you've got to do this. You need to send these things out, and then it doesn't get done. We've created our enhanced IRA solution where we'll be your mail. We'll take care of the mailings for you. And this is all included in our pricing, so that you won't have to worry about that. You'll just send us the information. We'll mail the letters out, notify you again in 30 or 45 days, and then you'll figure out who still has balances, and the plan sponsor will instruct the record keeper to send them over there. We take care of the mailings, we take care of the address searches, we take care of the printing the materials with that very expensive printer ink, and all of that we do free of charge, just assuming that you guys are going to use us for the IRAs for the non-responsive participants. You know, we also have a great customer support system. Once the money is out of the plan sponsor, the TPA, the advisor doesn't have to deal with these participants anymore. We've got a customer service line that the participants can call in. We send them a welcome letter to let them know that, hey, their money's been moved out of ABC 401k plan into a PenChecks IRA. It includes the information on how to contact us. We've got a very intuitive participant website, as well as a call center with people ready to take the calls. And that's one of the reasons why PenChecks, rather than some of the other providers out there, has such a very high success rate with reuniting people with their money. On average, in the first year, we reunite people with their money 50% of the time. Within the first 2 years, it's close to 70% of our time. 70% of the time, we reunite people with their money. They get that because it's not our job to hold this money long term. That's why we invested in a stable value fund per the DOL regulations. It's our job to find these people and reunite them with their money and get them onto it. And that's why we do that very, very well. versus our competition that has, after 2 years, usually a 30% reunite rate. You know, we've got, 30 full-time US clients, US based client support agents. Most of them are in Eastern San Diego County. Our trust company is headquartered in South Dakota. We have some people there. We'll answer the phone within 20 seconds. We've got over 12,000 calls a month. This is going to be one of our biggest months because we're sending out 1099-Rs to everybody that opened an IRA last year. So we expect a high call volume in January and February to help people reunite with their money. Now why choose PenChecks? We've been in the business 30 years. This is what we do. We were designed by TPAs for TPAs to help with this solution. We have a very competitive pricing structure where it actually doesn't charge the advisor, or the TPA, or the client anything. All of it is charged to the people that open the IRAs with us. Usually there would be an IRA setup fee and then a monthly fee for the IRA borne by the IRA provider. And the reason we charge monthly is because, again, it's not our job to hold this money. It's our job to reunite this money with with its actual owner, with an ex-employee. Now, just wanted to thank you for the opportunity for talking. Ari, thank you for everything you've done over the years. I've been working with Ari since I was a TPA in the early aughts. I've always loved and read his articles, and it's an honor for me to be here today. So thank you very much.
Yeah,
With that,
I don't know if you were involved, but one of my favorite business trips of all time is when I had to speak with Empower's TPAs way back when. And it was one of those crazy, when my kids were younger, I couldn't stay away. So I remember I had to speak at Colorado Springs. So I flew to Denver, took a car, then back and all that stuff.
So that wasn't Empower. That was Great West. That goes.
But to me, it's the same. It's all the same. Yeah,
Don't tell them that.
You
That
had
was
me
my-
first. I'm like, wait a second, that was Great West. Great West became Empower, but yeah.
At the Broadmoor, that was my first year there, and I was the guy that spearheaded getting you out there, because I'm like, hey, Ari's a rock star in the TPA community. If we're really serious about working with TPAs, we need to have him out here for that. So thank you very much.
That was a lot of fun. I was talking about paychecks and ADP, and there's a buddy of mine who was one of the TPAs who was a payroll provider TPA, and that was the first of the 2 times he walked out when I gave that same presentation. So, but he's no longer in the payroll business, but that's a whole nother story. So anyway, Kevin, I appreciate. I'll see you in Texas, I think, or I certainly go see you in the Bronx.
I'm definitely in the Bronx. I'm going to try to make it to Texas, but PenChecks will be there.
That's perfect. And of course, everybody sign up at 401ksite.com for the events. And we'll see you tomorrow, and check back later. We will put this up on YouTube. So I appreciate, and we'll see you back at noon tomorrow. Thanks.